Hello everybody, welcome back to another stream. Hope you're doing well as always. So, on last night's stream, I made a couple of goofs by having some videos that I'd already reacted to on the list, but we pivoted and made some adjustments. So the first thing we watched yesterday was Elden Ring Wants You to Stop Hitting Yourself by Polygon. Then we watched Elden Ring's Funniest Moments Are Also Its Darkest by Zvoke. Then, because in the middle of that video he had mentioned the abductor virgins could have been based off of Tanith, I thought that could have been a good transition into checking out Kite Tales' Who Is This Woman and Who Is That Baby? Elden Ring. So, we watched those, and then after that, we watched The Rare Moments When Elden Ring Is Happy, another video by Zvoke, and I had a bit more time than I expected, and so I tried to finish off with AAA Games Need Greed, and that actually took me way over time, so go figure. And today we're going to be looking at a few videos by one creator. I'm not actually sure how I pronounce this. Ontos. Forgive me if I've said it wrong. And he's recently joined the Discord, and we were talking a bit about the lore and whatnot. And so he wanted to get a lot of my perspective on some things. And so I figured I will do him the courtesy of checking out the videos he's recommended that he made so far. And so the first one for tonight, I have Deciphering Farum Azula's Secrets, Nigredo's Twinbird Unveiled in Elden Ring's Lore by Ontos, obviously. Then, moving on from that, we have The Age of Perfect Order, Radagon is Marika Explained. And finally, Egyptian Mythology, Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree DLC prediction. So, I don't know how much time we'll have left in the stream after I go through these videos, but if we have more time, I will probably figure out something else to watch. So, for those who may have noticed, he's already said something in the chat that he talked about Tarnished Archaeologist's Necropolis connection at some point in one of the videos, but he hasn't credited them on the video itself apparently, and he wanted to make it clear. And that he cannot be present for tonight's stream, and he'll check out the VOD later. So nonetheless, I appreciate the kind of disclaimer there, and welcome the openness to allow me to kind of react to your content in this format. So anyway, everybody else, welcome into stream. We've got Zelda here, Yogi the Buffalo, Capenda, Iman, and Scowlezy. Hope you're having a good night so far, or day, or whatever. The puppy's throwing a little fit, but We're all good. Okay. So let's go ahead and dive on into our first video of the night, Deciphering Farum Azula's Secrets, Nigredo's Twinbird Unveiled and Elden Ring's Lore. Alright, so there's a little bit of a disclaimer there. Let me turn on subs. Okay. Disclaimer, the following section will entail official information provided by FromSoft themselves in the official strategy guide, followed by his commentary and analysis, as they were already intuiting this truth. The implications are severe for the timeline and will be surprising for the uninitiated. He'll explain it all in this video. Please subscribe and like if you want them to continue making videos. This game is absolutely incredible. Ready your cup of coffee, tea, sit back and enjoy. Iman has divided feelings about these videos, so let's see them. Oh yeah, I should probably make a disclaimer that it's pretty clear that Ontos and I have some pretty major disagreements about the lore so far, and of course, like, the way that I look at the lore is very different from most, and so that's kind of why I'm going through this. So expect plenty of disagreement tonight, but with that being said, I also want to make it clear that even if I disagree with someone, that doesn't necessarily mean like I'm trying to be aggro against them. It's just sometimes there can be differences of opinion, differences of perspective, and by going through something like this, the ultimate goal is that everyone's perspectives can be broadened as well as my own. So even though I do tend to agree with people a lot, I do try to keep an open mind for the most part, and I also try to be abundantly clear when I'm speculating and where there's room for disagreement. So for everybody in chat, as always, remain respectful and we'll be having a good time. Do you want us to beat him up after this? Yeah. Break his legs. Scramble his brains. All right, let's go ahead and dive on in.
During the earliest period of history, all life originated from the Crucible, the primordial form of the current Erdtree, within which the aspects of every living creature was blended together.
Hey, look, guys, it's our first disagreement, not even 20 seconds into the video. So, with this being said, I would like to preface that I don't necessarily blame anybody who came to this conclusion as well, because at least in the English version, I don't know why, like, I never thought about like the extra head for this. It's kind of funny. Anyway, in the English version of the game, there's a couple descriptions which are different from the Japanese and can make it inadvertently sound as though the Crucible is older than it or might be, and or that it's kind of a different thing than it could be. So obviously what I said there was very vague. So let me go ahead and pull up some of the descriptions. All right, so the biggest culprit here, which is something I kind of had to unlearn a couple months after, playing the game and beating it for myself and having to like recontextualize the lore, in my opinion, is the Gilded Great Shield. So let me enlarge it for you guys. It's a metal great shield coated with gold, carried by knights loyal to Godric. The red tinge in the gold coat mirrors the primordial matter that became the Erdtree, the color of homeward yearning. And you have this description as it's written in English. People can only ever come to the conclusion that there was literally primordial matter that preceded the Erdtree, and that matter became the Erdtree. Like, that's it. That's the only possible description or only possible interpretation I can make from this English description here. However, there's a couple of notable differences in the Japanese. So, yeah, this is always kind of a pain in the ass to translate, especially on the fly. But so, as far as the English goes, it says that there's primordial matter, and the Japanese doesn't quite phrase it that way. So you've got golden tree, which means the Erdtree. The Erdtree's like possessive particle or like nominalization particle, add nominalization particle. It's annoying. Anyway, so you have the Erdtree's origins. Sorry, didn't mean to do that. So it's saying like this is close to the origins of the Erdtree, the coding of the Great Shield, and it possesses a red hue, a red flavoring, a red tint, and it is the color of reminiscence, nostalgia. So anyway, the point that I'm trying to make here is there's no primordial matter. It's just the origins of the Erdtree, as vague as that is red colored. So if there's only this description, that would be one thing. But unfortunately, with the broader context of things, this kind of turns what we think we may know about the Crucible up on its head. So let's go to the Crucible Knight armor set. Okay, so in all of the Crucible sets, it says it holds the power of the Crucible of Life, the primordial form of the Erdtree. And as far as this is concerned, this makes it sound as though there could be a different form of the Erdtree than we know of. Maybe that's like the primordial matter that was talked about in the Gilded Great Shield, if you're only looking with the English here. But again, the Japanese is a little bit different and really flips things on its head. So rather than primordial form of the Erdtree, we've got original Erdtree, houses the power of the Crucible of Life, essentially. So to say that in a more straightforward way, the armor houses the power of the Crucible of Life, the original Erdtree. So we're not necessarily talking about different forms of the Erdtree. Hold on, let me try to rephrase that. We're not talking about like a form of the Erdtree which predates the Erdtree. There is no such thing as primordial as far as the Japanese goes, and that's quite significant because primordial means like something that's prehistoric and can only really ever mean from like the beginning of time. However, the Japanese here uses gensho, which is kind of like a weird word, which can indeed mean like primal, primitive, primordial, depending on the right context. But with this description in particular, it doesn't have to read that way. And this is saying the original Erdtree. The issue with that is based off of like the Deathbird and Dragon items, we're told of a time which predates the Erdtree, and there's all this other form of life. So if the original Erdtree is closer to life in its nature, or houses the power of the like Crucible, I think that this is supposed to imply that the original form of the Erdtree is the Crucible, and the Crucible itself is the Erdtree during the time of Godfrey, and that later on the Crucible, aka the Erdtree, was changed, and that kind of coincides, I believe, with the timeline of Radagon and whatnot. But that's like a whole other can of worms that I don't want to open right now, especially since we're only literally 20 seconds into the video. So to kind of summarize and recap all of this tangent that I've gone on so far, there's not necessarily a primordial form of the Erdtree, but at the very least there is an original Erdtree as stated by the Japanese text, and everything relating to this kind of original Erdtree and Crucible most specifically, in my opinion, is related to Godfrey, or the Crucible Knights who serve Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. And there's a lot more to tie into this, and I will go over this in excruciating detail in like my next full-fledged video, so be on the lookout for that. Although like it's nowhere near ready for like production, so it's probably going to be a while, to be honest. Anyway, now I've got live chat going on. All right, so was there anything else? Oh, yeah. So the Crucible stuff, because the Crucible, in my estimation, is related to the Erdtree specifically, and if there is life before the Erdtree, that would mean that not all life came from the Crucible, because the Crucible is the Erdtree. So hopefully that makes sense. So that's kind of where I begin my disagreements with Ontos with this video so far. So, okay.
The Crucible's primal vital energies give rise to a new species with every imaginable combination of traits: amphibian, avian, septilian, mammalian, and countless others besides. The lands were dominated by beasts who had gained intelligence, as well as ancient dragons whom they serve. Dragon Lord Plesudisax has said to have been presided over this era long before the establishment of the Golden Order as the first Elden Lord. However,
so another thing that I would disagree with is the whole presentation that like all other life came from like the Crucible and was blended together. Well, I don't necessarily think it's wrong to say that the Crucible blended all life together. I would disagree with the premise that all life came from the Crucible, as I'd mentioned a moment ago, and part of my rationale for that, beyond the whole like Deathbird dragon stuff, is I think before the age of the Erdtree, life wasn't blended nearly the way that many people think it must have been, because when you look back at things like the Ul and Erd dynasty, you've got the Elden John statues kind of looking like men. They're not necessarily anything like the Misbegotten or the Omen or the Beastmen. They still seem like relatively humanoid. And to go along with that, I think from the little bit of prehistoric stuff that we do know, I don't think it quite shows like life being blended together beyond what we can tie directly to the Crucible and the Age of Godfrey specifically. So I would argue things like the Misbegotten and the Omen are byproducts of life being blended together in the Erdtree, essentially. So hopefully that makes sense. You don't see chat? Maybe that's a you problem? Weird. Okay. Hey, Drew Wang and Joji Poji, Hilko, and Clown. Wow, that's a lot of you at once. Yeah, and as Scowleasy says, primordial implies it was a different form of the Erdtree rather than the Erdtree back in ancient times. Yes, that's a good way to rephrase that. Thank you.
However, the fledgling planet was not alone in the vast expanse of the cosmos, and before long, a host of outer gods and fell creatures of the starry void took notice of its existence and exerted various degrees of influence over the young planet and its civilizations. Of these entities, the Greater Will played the most direct and significant role in shaping the New World, and is said to have sent a golden star to the lands between, bearing a beast which was the living incarnation of the Order. To spread its teachings and cement its control over the populace, Greater Will relied on bizarre hand-like creatures collectively known as the Fingers, which served as both its missionaries and enforcers. After a long and brutal times of conflict, this led to an establishment of theocracy dedicated to the Golden Order, a system of absolute laws embodied by the Erdtree and sustained through the Elden Ring's power.
So, just to give a little bit of context of what he's saying right here and how I disagree from it, is based off of like what I know he believes. He would say that the Golden Order begins during the Age of Godfrey, but I would disagree with that, and I'm more of the opinion that the Golden Order itself begins with Radagon, and I'll just kind of leave that alone for now because it'll probably come up later in the video, to be honest.
See, it's very important to realize Farum Azula, the primordial land, wasn't always flying up above as we see it in Marika's era, but actually was a part of the lands between as a significant landmass. In fact, Plesudisax's reign as the first Elden Lord was under a previous Elden Ring and a different outer god than the Greater Will, the outer god of death. When the golden meteor bearing an Elden...
And that's something that I would necessarily disagree with because we're never given explicit confirmation for this to be the case, and I actually dislike how he's framing the video by not being clear that this is kind of speculation. It's all stated as fact, which I really dislike in lore videos.
Golden Beast was sent to the lands between by the Greater Will. Due to the destruction of the meteoric gravity, the capital Farum Azula ascended high up in the skies, no longer a part of the lands between. Marika, being of Numan origin, is of a different land from the lands between, and before
So I want to back that up just so I catch what he said verbatim before I jump on it.
bearing an Elden beast was sent to the land of death. When the golden meteor bearing an Elden beast was sent to the lands between by the Greater Will, due to the destruction of the meteoric gravity, the capital Farum Azula ascended high up in the skies. No longer.
Right, so that's what I thought he said, and this is something that I don't necessarily entirely disagree with it. However, it's not that set in stone, I guess pun intended here, that when Farum Azula was sent into the skies, that it was when the Elden Beast arrived in the land between, and there's plenty of reason to believe that Farum Azula's ascension, so to speak, happened much later in the timeline than this. And I'm pretty sure we'll get into that more in a little bit here.
Longer a part of the lands between. Marika, being of Numan origin, is of a different land from the lands between, and before establishing as the dominant theocracy, the Stormlord, Glowmite Queen, and Fire Giants, outer gods and armies alike stood as the most persistent oppositions to Marika's Golden Order. The Numan are descendants of denizens of another world. They are long-lived but seldom born. The Numan are said to have come from outside the lands between, are in fact the same stock as Queen Marika herself. Numans have come from the lands between on Greater Will's meteor from another world. If Marika wanted to establish the Golden Order of the Erdtree under Greater Will, she needed to eradicate all opposition first. Only then could the age of the Erdtree flourish in the lands between. But before we get to this opposition with the Stormlord and the Fire Giants, we need to examine the outer god of Farum Azula before the Greater Will, the god who has abandoned Elden Lord Plesudisax, whose current whereabouts are unknown.
So I feel like this has left a little bit of a contradiction with some of the things that he's presented so far. So earlier he had mentioned that during Plesudisax's reign, the Elden Ring was headed by a different god, a different outer god even, the god of death, which, I disagreed with because I didn't think it was a claim that was very well supported. But going back further than that, I feel as though we should ask ourselves, okay, well then, if this alleged god of death controlled the Elden Ring, when did it wrest control away from the Greater Will? Because we're told in the Elden Stars description that the Greater Will sent, the Elden Beast and the Elden Ring down. So was it just picked up by the dragons, and the dragons were vassals of the outer god of death? Is that what's going on in his mind here? But now this statement here makes it sound as though the Greater Will is what left Plesudisax, and maybe he'll support this more later and say once the Greater Will left, that's when the god of death took over. But I don't really feel as though that's the direction that he's going down. So I feel like some of these claims need a bit more critical examination so far. Oh, Reginald, I disagree.
The Dragon Lord whose seat lies at the heart of the storm beyond time is said to have been the Elden Lord in the age before the Erdtree. Once his god was fled, the Lord continued to await its return. Before we go further, if you're well versed in Elden Ring's lore, you might have an objection brimming in your mind right now in regards to what I've been saying all along, in the particular way I've explained this origin story. See, I've talked about Farum Azula and dragons before Greater Will's arrival to the lands between. Since it's written here that Plesudisax to be the former Elden Lord, I've already made a logical blunder, right? Well, not so fast. All of this was intentional. These series of events in the exact way that I've described is supplemented officially by From Software themselves. In the strategy guidebook number 1, in the very end, the lore and world building is explained in a sequential manner. And guess what? Farum Azula, beasts and dragons are explained as the ultimate origin story. Then the Greater Will sends the vessel beast and Marika, who is of Numan origin from another world. Marika starts her political and military struggle to assert their dominance as the Golden Order, trying to exert their influence on the world with an existing outer god and a political infrastructure in its capital Farum Azula. As we can clearly see from this...
I feel like I should actually read this stuff because it's a little bit easy. Yeah, so I think this might be a little bit unfortunate because without the direct quote of the strategy guide, he can kind of use this as a tool and clip it out of context to support arguments that I don't necessarily know that the book is trying to make. But nonetheless, I would still kind of agree with the book's interpretation here that the dragons and whatnot preceded the arrival of the golden meteor and whatnot. But I'm sure I'll talk about it a bit more. Let me just read some of this real quick. He says, the greater will ultimate bias is its life-reinforcing and death-denying nature, making Marika its vision's perfect vessel. Okay. And then Scowleezy asks, when did Marika take the Elden Ring inside her? That's a fantastic question that we do not have a very good answer for whatsoever. I have had some tinfoil thoughts that it's possible that Marika could have arrived in the lands between with the Elden Ring, and she could have kind of always been the vision's vessel, I guess. But, there's really nothing there to support or deny it. So your headcanon is the answer.
In its capital, Farum Azula. As we can clearly see from this image where we fought Malekith, a different Elden Ring was the metaphysical representation of the lands between in this primordial era. In the era where a different outer god was in operation before the Greater Will, and we see this outer god trying to reassert its dominance after being plucked from the Golden Order in the base game, doing its best to revert back to its former glory in whatever way possible, just like the other outer gods like the Mother of Blood or the God of Rot. Godwin's curse and...
Right, so this is running into the issue of the Elden Ring simultaneously existing and not existing at the same time. It's kind of like Schrodinger's Elden Ring here, where if there is this kind of, more primal form of the Elden Ring in Farum Azula, but this is also supposed to have been in the time before the Greater Will sent the Elden Ring down. How does that really work? Where is this outer god actually fitting into things? Because you're running into an issue of the timeline here.
Outer gods like the Mother of Blood or the God of Rot. Godwin's curse and Malekith's destined death. These are extremely important to understand this particular outer god. But before we get to this and who this outer god is exactly, let's read the Old Lord Talisman description. A legendary talisman depicting the ancient king whose seat lies at the heart of the storm beyond time. It is said that the ancient royal city of Farum Azula has been slowly crumbling since time immemorial. The phrase time immemorial means a time in the past that was so long ago that people have no knowledge or memory of it. The Golden Order was created by confining destined death. Thus, this new order will be one of death restored. This means the Elden Ring of the primordial times in Farum Azula, shown in this picture, was from the outer god relating to death in some ways.
Okay, I'll need to think about this a little bit more. Because the way that I would disagree with it is very easy from the perspective that I hold that the Golden Order is particular to Radagon's time. But to be more fair to Ontos's interpretation of the chronology of Elden Ring, I would need to also consider what that would mean of death restored if the Golden Order began with Godfrey specifically. I don't really think that makes a ton of changes. Yeah, I don't think it does, but I'm just want to back it up and listen to how he says it. And before going back into that, I do feel as though it is really important to take into consideration when the item descriptions use hearsay to, set things up. So it is said that the ancient city of Farum Azula has been slowly crumbling since time immemorial. Well, this might be true. It could also very well just be a story that's told in the lands between, but I don't think that part is too significant. But at the very least, in the remembrance of Placidusax, no, it is, yeah, either way, when it calls him the Elden Lord before, like in the age before Godfrey and whatnot, it does use hearsay, and I'm of the opinion that Placidusax cannot have actually been a bona fide Elden Lord, because in many other descriptions, Godfrey is stated to have been the first Elden Lord. And as soon as you have an actual contradiction between items that extends beyond hearsay or, lore concessions to gameplay mechanics, I think you really inadvertently shoot yourself in the foot and cause all further conversations about the lore to break down. Because if you can't trust the item descriptions, then you can't trust the most basic facts with which you can work to talk about the lore. Yeah, okay. Can I go back and read the text you've written with the runes? Hold on. I might be a little bit further. Let me back up a bit more. We're talking about this text, and also welcome into the stream. And also, it's LP, not LA, or I don't really care. It's just kind of funny that you've consistently done LA to me. Okay. So Iman was asking, by the way, why didn't you put the quote from the guidebook to support your story here? And that was something that I was wondering as well, because it kind of makes it hard to either confirm or confirm or deny what you're talking about. Oh yeah, and as Iman says, it would also be nice if you quoted what page that it came from in the book, so that way people could look it up themselves. Scally says, for Marika and the Elden Ring, if she joined with the beast when it landed, then she might have been influenced by it from the beginning. And that is like an actual possibility, especially depending on one's feelings about the little statuette in front of the Elden Ring depiction in Farum Azula, the one with 3 wolves showing a woman. That could have very well been Marika for all we know, but we don't know. Conscom asks, sorry if you've explained this before, but why do you think the Golden Order started with Radagon? There are a lot of reasons. I will not be able to remember all of them off the top of my head. This is something that came up again in the Discord last night, and I made a list. Hold on, let me pull it up real quick. And this list is not conclusive. I thought of some more things even after it, but, right. I don't want to go through this full list, but anyway, I've gotten 18 different reasons, but the general gist of things is that I think there's evidence of death existing in the lands between during Godfrey's time. I think there's a contradiction between when the Erdtree was kind of more mortal, and that was all during the Age of Abundance, and I think it was later made to be eternal and perfect with the rise of Radagon and whatnot, and that form of the Golden Order. And I don't think there's meant to be a difference between the Golden Order and Golden Order fundamentalism. And in Radagon's boss title plate, the Japanese title that he uses is the Golden Order, Radagon. So it makes it sound as though Radagon himself is the Golden Order, rather than just being like Radagon of the Golden Order, which, I mean, it can carry the same connotations between the English and the Japanese, but there's a lot less ambiguity in the Japanese about it. And is there anything like super big that's also worth consideration? I mean, the other stuff with like the Gloam-Eyed Queen and Black Flame is worthy of consideration, because depending on when you think the Black Flame monks betrayed the Fire monks and everything like that, if you think that when they betrayed the normal Fire monks that the Gloam-Eyed Queen was still alive, then that would mean that it would have to have happened after the birth of the Erdtree, after the war against the Fire Giants, because the Fire monks were the former Erdtree forces that were like left behind to guard the Giant's Flame. And so if the Glow-Eyed Queen was alive, I mean, that means Destined Death is still alive and kicking as far as we know. And there's like a bunch of other stuff. So anyway, I think death is active during the Age of Abundance, and it gets removed sometime before the Shattering, and I think the most likely time would be either when Marika divests Godfrey and the Tarnished of their grace, or when Radagon becomes Elden Lord, and there's a good chance that's kind of like the same event. Joji said that their understanding based on Tarnished archaeologist videos was that there were different outer gods for different time periods, and Farum's ring is from an entirely different era, the Crucible area. Okay, so that might make more sense as to why Ontos was like going with this. I have some vehement disagreements with Tarnished archaeologist. I feel like his timeline is really, really, really bad, actually. And so that might like play into things. Maybe he expanded more on different videos, walked things back. I can't really say, but yeah. Anyway, like the biggest disagreement that I have with Tarnished archaeologist is that he was arguing that Destined Death was removed from the Elden Ring upon the Shattering, but that doesn't make any sense because Destined Death needed to have already been removed for it to be stolen by Ronnie to kill Godwin. But I also might be misremembering exactly how he phrased it, but there's like other issues with it as well. Joji said, the greater will doesn't care what form the ring takes and what form of influence its power. That's why there were 3 fingers and 2 fingers. The god associated to the 3 fingers was banned, and Radagon came after Marika, did he not? That's why there were statues of her as a child. Radagon appeared after either Marika's other or self-creation or something more. So, right, I'm saying that Radagon comes into the scene later, but I don't think Destined Death was removed until later either. So, all right, so I'm not sure what text Ontos wanted me to read. He said the ones with the runes, but I don't see the runes here, so I'm assuming it might be a little bit later here. Okay. I'm just going to like go from here.
It's like the other outer gods, like the Mother of Blood or the God of Rot, Godwin's Curse, and Malekith's Destined Death. These are extremely important to understand this particular outer god. But before we get to this and who this outer god is exactly, let's read the Old Lord Talisman description. A legendary talisman depicting the ancient king whose seat lies at the heart of the storm beyond time. It is said that the ancient royal city of Farum Azula has been slowly crumbling since time immemorial. The phrase time immemorial means a time in the past that was so long ago that people have no knowledge or memory of it. The Golden Order was created by confining Destined Death. Thus, this new order will be one of death restored. This means the Elden Ring of the primordial times in Farum Azula, shown in this picture.
Alright, so he says, the Rune of Death was plucked from the Golden Order upon its creation, as can be observed by the Twinbirds Farum Azula in comparison to the Greater Will Erdtree Golden Order. So, hold on. Yeah, I understand this. He's trying to say that this was the Ring of Death, and it got removed into creating this version of the Elden Ring, which it might be true, it might not. We don't have enough information. The weird thing is, well, definitely I would agree that the Royal Highway depiction of the Elden Ring is substantially different and should be examined further. There is some ambiguity as to the design of the Farum Azula Elden Ring because, at least for the concept art, let me pull it up. Gotta find it. Hold on one second. I can't show desktop, really? Okay, there we go. This is not it. I really need to like go and label this stuff properly sometime. It might be in the other one. Right, I feel like I'm blind. Right, I think I'm in the wrong book. That's not it. I'm struggling to find it right now. Maybe I should just Google it. Oh, I found it. Okay. All right, so in the concept art for the Farum Azula and Elden Ring, it does look a little bit more muted back here. This is kind of the final like bottom ring, and this rest of the depiction of the Elden Ring does look similar to like this form of the Elden Ring, or well, yeah, this form of it. And so while it looks brighter here, that makes me wonder whether or not it's supposed to be like this form of the Elden Ring, or whether or not this is a different thing. But nonetheless, I do think this is a very good thing to bring up. But as to whether or not this is the Rune of Death specifically is unclear. There's also the weird possibility that it could be the rune of the unborn demigods, the one that like the amber egg essentially, because that one's lost. But I don't really think it makes a ton of sense because it's like missing the little pole on the side. Like it'd be more likely to be like one of these central ones, but that's not too important really. Okay, so next is the Farum Azula Crucible sign depicts the earliest period in the history of the lands between and has the Rune of Death. I wouldn't necessarily agree that it depicts the earliest period in the history of the lands between, because we do potentially have the Ul and Erd dynasties predating the stuff with Farum Azula, and part of the reason I would say that is, even if not like the Ul and Erd dynasties specifically, we have like the Claymen, and they seem like prehistoric on a level that's even like further removed from civilization than the Beastmen of Farum Azula, because like they worked with metals and whatnot. But the clan don't really seem to use metals. We've got the little horned ancestor followers also eschewing metal and civilization. So there are some other like prehistoric peoples that don't really seem to fit in well with these kind of thoughts right here, but nonetheless, it's really easy to overlook those kind of details. So then he says, the Erdtree Crucible era represents only the post-Greater Will's arrival to the lands between, not the origin of the lands between. So he is trying to distinguish a primordial Crucible era, which is more dragon affiliated, and a post-Erdtree Crucible era. I would disagree with that because, in my opinion, the Crucible is very directly linked to Godfrey, and there's nothing concrete for me to believe that it extends to the era before Godfrey, which I know that is not how most people read the game, but I mean, that's just kind of where we would have some fundamental disagreements. And then he says, this is why Ania says Greater Will would not allow for the reintegration of destined death back into the world when we told her of our aspirations to burn the Erdtree. Extremely important to understand for the timeline of Elden Ring. So, another thing worth talking about in some of our differences of opinion about the timeline and whatnot is, in my framework, because destined death gets sealed when Radagon becomes Elden Lord, it isn't necessarily a bad thing to restore death in the mending rune of Fia, but even like setting that much aside, I think that's kind of like a critical misreading of what Fia's mending rune is trying to say, and this is slightly on the Japanese side of things. I don't know. Hold on, let me pull it up. All right, so with the Mending Rune of the Death Prince, it says the Golden Order was created by confining destined death. Confining means removed, like removing destined death here. Thus, this new order will be one of death restored. So, as far as like the Japanese goes, we have it kind of written as more of like hypothetical type statement with dearo. Does it actually say? Probably will, probably may, I think, surely. Yeah, so I'm surprised it has like that. Anyway, right. So it's saying like once destined death was plucked or removed from the Elden Ring, that's when the Golden Order started. And with that being the case, then the new order might be a return of death. And this, I think, is meant to represent like the wishes of the like person that created the Mending Rune here, and isn't necessarily completely factual, because death as we know it has been fragmented through Deathroot and the Rune of Death like being broken in half. Maybe it could be mended with like the Mending Rune of the Death Prince with like the two half wheels. That might be what it's trying to get at, but at the very least the nature of death would be completely different, because rather than things dying, this order seeks to integrate like those who live in death into the Elden Ring. Yeah, so the English says it will embed the principle of life within death into order, but if you think about it, life within death wasn't exactly a thing before the Golden Order. I know you could argue that there were those lost in death, but as far as life within like those who live in death is concerned, it's very concretely tied to coming into contact with Deathroot specifically. And so those who live in death is different than those lost in death, even if like the end result is similar enough to each other that they can't really be distinguished. Yeah, and it's the same thing, like the way of living in death. Okay. Let me pull up chat real quick. Scowleys says, and given that the ring is literally the Elden Beast, you fail to see how it'd be associated with a different god. That's kind of where I'm at right now, and he might go into more detail about that. Let me pull that away. Drew Wang's opinion was that Farum Azula was the primal civilization, but was removed from the lands between and locked in a sort of time stasis, while other civilizations rose and fell in the lands between. So that's definitely understandable, but then the question is, when does that happen? And if that were to be the case, it doesn't make a lot of sense that you have the same kind of architecture showing up in both Leyndell and Farum Azula. One would think that there would be much more substantial differences between the two. And for those who might not know what I'm talking about specifically, we've got things like the sunflower type crest, which shows in the boss fight of Castle Sol with Commander Niall. It looks like a flower or like a sun. That shows up on like the Great Farum Great Bridge. That also shows up before like the lightning thrower with all the hawks in Farum Azula and things like that. So yeah. And then of course, like we have to ask ourselves, when did like golden seeds land in Farum Azula? When did Deathroot land in Farum Azula? And then how have they flourished if it's truly in a kind of stasis, which I think throws a lot of shade on that theory to begin with, that Farum Azula, as we know it, doesn't seem to be quite in the stasis that some people think it is. And if anything, the only true form of stasis that might exist within Farum Azula might be within the storm itself. See, I would disagree with the way that you're characterizing that, Ontos, that all the novel storytelling you did up until 2 minutes is directly quoted from the official book. I don't buy it, because then you would just need to quote the book, and that's like the wrong way to go about doing it.
God relating to death in some ways, and with Godwin's rune, we're restoring that death, plucked from the Golden Order in its creation by Marika. Formed of the two Hallowbrand half-wheels combined, it will embed the principle of life within death into order. The life was embedded into death before it was plucked from the Elden Ring by Marika's Golden Order. Those who live in death, or in other words, the spirit world, was natural, and military structures like the D Brothers was not trying to murder and erase those who live in death. The outer god of the primordial lands, the reason for Godwyn's affliction of Deathroot Curse, the god who has fled from Plesudisax and he who is still awaiting his return in Farum Azula, was none other than the outer god of the Twinbird. Shield featuring a vividly painted Twinbird. The Twinbird is said to be the envoy of an outer god and mother of the Deathbirds. When you look at this picture in Farum Azula, you will see two birds just in the same exact way portrayed in this Twinbird kite shield. As you can see, this is not a dragon or a representation of Plesudisax. These are clearly two birds, the Twinbirds, the original envoy beast of an outer god of Farum Azula, symbolizing the duality of life and death. Think of the Twinbird as an envoy similar to how Elden Beast is an envoy to greater will. There are two specific items in the game that describes the Twinbird's contrasting qualities in this shield. A talisman adorned with red feathers, once used in ancient death rituals, and a glorious end awaits those who cling so tenaciously to life. The heart sings when one draws close to death, thus does one cling so tenaciously to life, to render up a death worth offering. The bird phoenix, reborn from its ashes in death, the duality of life and death embedded into a single realm called living in death, the primordial duality existing simultaneously. As you can see, the Twinbird, similar to how the qualities of living beings were blended together in the Crucible era, in this age, death was imbued within life, not yet separated distinctly like in Marika's order. In Farum Azula, the outer god of Twinbird is a doomed, crumbling realm of a relic long past its usefulness in Marika's Golden Order, the death-denying order of the Erdtree.
So this, it's kind of hard to talk about this because, hold on, let me look at that. Right, because I would disagree that the Twinbirds and whatnot represent life within death, and I think that's super well substantiated. Obviously there is like the cycle of rebirth and whatnot, which is like talked about throughout the games, but in my estimation, the whole principle of life within death is a post-Godwyn phenomenon, and that there is nothing, like there was no sign of it before that happened, before he got by the Rune of Death. And my argument is the whole reason why you have those who live in death is because the concept of death was actually removed from the Elden Ring, and because death itself is removed, while the body might die for a time, that doesn't mean the spirit can die anymore. And if you bring death back into the lands between, then the spirit should die and go on to do like its normal thing that would have happened before the Erdtree, or before like the Golden Order. And Fia's rune is a completely different paradigm where it's going to establish this kind of new world order into the ring, and that's why like it's not a true return of death, it's just like a different form of it. Like living in death is the way.
In this age, death was imbued within life, not yet separated distinctly like in Marika's order. In Farum Azula, the outer god of Twinbird is a doomed, crumbling realm of a relic long past its usefulness in Marika's Golden Order, the death-denying order of the Erdtree, of the greater will, a depiction of all that Marika disdains and rejects, her shadow aspect as an analogy to psychology, now a realm forever crumbling after a meteor impacted it long ago, up in the skies by the meteor bearing a golden beast sent by the greater will. As you can see from the gold being offered on the dead, Farum Azula was not just a primitive society.
Alright, so one thing that's also worth talking about is if you distinguish the Crucible from the Golden Order, why is it not the Erdtree Golden Order era if like death was already removed here? It seems a little bit counterintuitive to show this symbol specifically, because this has the symbol of Radagon in the background there. That's his Elden Rune, as according to Radagon's Source Seal and Scar Seal. So maybe this is just not the kind of image that you wanted to show that. Maybe you think it's something different. But I feel like this is kind of important, that if the Golden Order occurs at the onset of Godfrey's reign, then there's really no differentiation between the Golden Order and the quote-unquote Erdtree Crucible era. And so if that's the case, you could just say like there was the Crucible and then there was the Golden Order, if that's the way you truly feel about things.
Beast sent by the greater will. As you can see from the gold being offered on the dead, Farum Azula was not just a primitive society. Having gained intelligence, the beasts must have felt how their wildness slipped away as civilization took hold. With this bestial society became more complex, they started burying their dead, often associated with ritual sacrifices or burial with sacred objects. Our distant cousins Neanderthals have also buried their dead in a similar manner, maybe even with the hope of an afterlife. As you can see, the current beastman of Farum Azula, after Marika's order turned into the dominant power in the realm,
All right, and just so if anybody's curious, like this corpse does not belong to a Neanderthal. That's a little bit misleading there. I don't think that was intentional, but you know, just for clarity's sake.
Maybe even with the hope of an afterlife. As you can see, the current beastman of Farum Azula, after Marika's order turned into the dominant power in the realm, the intelligence that was granted to them has been revoked. They have reverted back to their primitive existence. The reason for this is clear. The Twinbird being replaced by the Greater Will as the dominant outer god has resulted in its powers being sealed, and the intelligence it granted to its subjects, beasts, who were serving their masters, dragons, have been revoked. Just like how the concept of death is suppressed in Marika's order. All the beastmen buried in Farum Azula have ornate gold jewelry, a very specific and informative design choice. The real-world inspiration, the Varna necropolis, was discovered in the 19th century in modern-day Bulgaria. Each of the bodies was buried with a remarkable array of gold jewelry. Some of the tombs had no body at all, only a symbolic grave with golds decorated regardless. Only when the researchers had come across the burial number 43 did they realize the significance of their find. There was more gold jewelry in this particular burial site than all the other prehistoric sites combined. Necklaces, gold bracelets, ornamentations, you name it. 3,000 gold artifacts were found, meaning 6 kilograms of gold in a single burial site, estimated to be about 6,000 years old. See, when we look at the dead of Farum Azula, we can clearly see the inspiration. One part of the Twinbird, the Death Birds, were preparing for its other half, its inevitable afterlife in death, in the spirit world. In Marika's age, after Godwyn has become the Prince of Death and infested destined death in the lands between, one of the protectors of the soulless children of Marika, the Headless Luthil, makes it clear. Spirit of a headless knight who leads the mausoleum soldiers, Luthil sacrificed her life so that in death she could continue to protect the soulless demigod until their revival, earning her the hero's honor of Erdtree burial. The Wandering Mausoleums houses the unwanted soulless children of Marika. When Ranni has imbued the Black Knives with destined death on that fateful night, and had given Godwyn a soulless death, He was chosen by the formerly suppressed outer god of Twinbird to be its vessel for influence of the lands between via Deathroot's curse.
So while I don't necessarily agree with that, I think it's a very interesting perspective that might be like worth further consideration, because there's a lot of other stuff like the death birds and like their death hexes, which are kind of related to the curse mark of death, that might tie into this stuff. So, we'll see how it goes.
Unlike the other demigods, Godwyn had an Erdtree burial. It was the perfect opportunity for the outer god of Twinbird to exert its influence via the Deathroot's curse of those who live in death. As you can see from the Mausoleum Knight armor, the influences of the Twinbird, who is the mother of all death birds, is clear from the feathers protruding. Those wings are also directly referenced by name in the armor itself. Armor worn by headless knights who endlessly guard the wandering mausoleums. The wing-shaped ornaments in its back evoke the death bird, a self-inflicted curse that ties the spirits of these loyal knights to the land, having willingly beheaded themselves so that they may serve their masters in death. Similarly, when we look at the Mending Rune of the Death Prince, unlike what you might believe at first glance, this is not destined death being released back into the world, as we already did that after defeating Malekith. The Rune of Death Prince is different than destined death. It is the age of those who live in death, a nod to the outer god of the primordial lands, embedding the principle of life within death into the order. The Twinbird represented life and death simultaneously, blended together, just like the Crucible era. Ancestral spirits exist as a phenomenon beyond the purview of the Erdtree.
So I'm glad he's bringing this up into consideration, because I thought about bringing this and the, is it Blessing of the Erdtree description? Anyway, right, so now I'm curious as to what exactly he means when he's trying to say that the Deathbird Otter God is something that lived in death, but it is apparently not like those who live in death. So yeah, the part leading up to this did not make that clear, and so I'm a little bit confused right now.
Life sprouts from death as it does from birth. Such is the way of the living. Coming back to Farum Azula, the golden jewels bear striking resemblance to bracelets and trinkets. See, in real-world prehistory, before the more sophisticated metallurgy was developed, societies relied on the most easily accessible metals for production of jewelry. They did not produce alloys by heating and combining different metals. In other words, all the gold in Varna Necropolis was unalloyed. But for the context within Elden Ring, it was primordial. The Greater Will sent a golden meteor bearing a beast into the lands between. Yet this gold is yellow, and this is not the primordial color of unalloyed gold. The difference of color decided the quality of the gold. Great Sword of Ordovis.
Yeah, hold on. Let me... Alright, so he's using the Elden Star's description here, and he's trying to say that this was all yellow gold. I'm going to have a lot of disagreements with this in a moment here, but let's see where it goes. The Ordovis' greatsword
Decided the quality of the gold. Great Sword of Ordovis, one of the two honored as foremost among the Crucible Knights. This sword is imbued with an ancient holy essence. Its red tint exemplifies the nature of primordial gold, said to be close in nature to life itself. We can see this red primordial gold in the Farum Azula dragons, before they fell out of grace after Golden Order's dominance. The light...
So let me read that for you. Conclusion: red is the true color of gold. Just as Rubio in Alchemical Pursuit of Gold is red, so is the unalloyed gold. The primordial color of the dragon's powers of Farum Azula is not yellow, but red, the same red tint that Ordovis' greatsword inherits. So... I'm going to let you finish your point, and then I'll go into that.
Lightning incantations they use is all red. We don't see this unalloyed red gold in material form because it hasn't been created yet, but can see its power in Farum Azula Dragon's primordial lightning. Dragon King Placidusax's Craigblade's weapon skill contains something called Primeval Lightning. Just like many Dragon Lightning incantations, it has a red as opposed to yellow color, painting a stark contrast to paltry dragons of today after Twinbird's banishment and Golden Order's enslavement of the Rune of Death. Piercing Gravelstone sword containing Primeval Lightning, a portion of the Dragon Lord's power gained from a remembrance. This weapon commands great power over the paltry, mortal dragons of today. You can see the Primeval Lightning Thundercloud here. Temporarily transform into a red thundercloud and fly through the air, and then plunge down with a lightning-infused blade. See, in the alchemical pursuit, the unalloyed gold is red, not yellow. Rubido describes the final stage of maturation as red gold, and Philosopher's Stone is also associated with the color red, signaling alchemical success of turning a substance into gold, the end of the magnum opus, which is why Miquella, in his current form, is cursed with eternal youth and is not representing the true unalloyed gold. In the DLC, most likely we will help Miquella finish his alchemical process of maturation by adding redness into his yellow gold, resulting in Rubido. As we know from cut content,
if anything, it would be the other way around. That you would want to remove the yellowness from redness if it's actually supposed to be unalloyed in that it's pure. But that's kind of splitting hairs, not really relevant. Iman had a funny comment in that when Placidusax does use Placidusax's Ruin, the breath attack, he does breathe a kind of golden fire and shoots a golden laser beam, like gold as in yellow.
Saint Trina is another persona of Miquella, and are actually the same person. A proper integration of these two personas would result in mixing of colors purple and yellow, and that would give a dark red-brown color in a high saturation blend, just like Ordovis' sword.
I'm Ron Burgundy?
The red tint of gold, the magnum opus of alchemical pursuit, the true unalloyed gold.
Alright, so I've got a lot to say, and it's going to be a little bit awkward to talk about. Let me pull this up again. So I brought this up earlier in the Discord today, that there might actually be a typo for the Japanese description of Ordovis' greatsword. And okay, I guess that's good enough. When you look at all of the other forms of like the Crucible Knight armor, the Crucible Wing Knot, and the other talisman, they use a couple different phrases, but Ordovis seems to break from that convention. So the Crucible Axe helm, armor, gauntlets, greaves, tree helm, tree armor, etc., they all say that they hold the power of the primordial Erdtree, and I disagree with the word primordial, but I'm just trying to, show off the equivalent use between the English and Japanese here. And the same thing can be found in Siluria's tree as the Ordovis' greatsword description, with the subtraction of one character, which means tree. So the primordial Erdtree is close in nature to life, etc., etc. Whereas, okay, so if you compare Siluria's tree and Ordovis' great shield directly, this is mostly the same opening line, except it's missing one character right here in this. So I guess it's backwards in this. I take that back. I'm blind. So anyway, this is kind of the same for the most part. So you have Gensho no Ogon, which does mean like the original or primordial gold, depending on the context. And gold here is gold. However, when you add tree after gold, you get golden tree, which is what the Japanese call the Erdtree for whatever reason. So if this description just kind of forgot a letter, then it could be read a completely different way, where it's saying the original Erdtree was closer in nature to life, and therefore it's said to have had a red hue, essentially. So it could be saying that the Erdtree was originally reddish in nature. And that would make a lot more sense in the greater context of the game. But, yeah, it is technically unclear whether or not this is intentional or if it is a typo, but I think it's worth considering nonetheless. And to kind of corroborate this idea of the Erdtree being red, I think we could turn back to the Gilded Great Shield's description, where it says the red tinge in the gold coat mirrors the primordial matter that became the Erdtree. I talked about this earlier in stream where I have like a lot of issues with the translation here, but it's supposed to be the color of homeward yearning. The main takeaway that I want to get around here now is red tinge equals Erdtree, comma, the color of homeward yearning. That's kind of similar here where it says like its gilding is close to the Erdtree's origins and possesses a red color. So the origin of the Erdtree is red, and that kind of ties into like the whole Ordovis and Silurian tree stuff where it talks about like the primordial Erdtree or like the original Erdtree as it's used in other Crucible Knight set descriptions. So yeah, alchemy strikes again. It's kind of funny, just a slideshow.
Hello everyone, if you want me to continue making videos like this, consider lending me your support on Patreon. Link is in the description. Any and all help is appreciated. Please subscribe to the channel to show your support. Like and comment below this video telling me your thoughts. I answer all of your comments. This was part 1 of the Farum Azula and Dragon series, which I'm to conclude with part 2. I hope this was a comprehensive and rich introduction to this aspect of the lore that I rarely see people discuss. I only wish I made it justice, trying to send my regards to this amazing game and its lore. Thank you, Miyazaki. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Okay, so I kind of want to re-examine the part in relation to like the Deathbird and those who live in death, because I felt like that could have been a bit clearer.
And military structures like the outer god of the primordial lands, the reason for Godwyn's affliction of Deathroot curse, the god who has fled from Plesutissax and he who is still awaiting his return in Farum Azula was none other than the outer god of the Twinbird.
Right, so even like setting aside the life and death stuff aside for now, I think I just repeated myself. I still think we run into that issue of the Elden Ring being sent down by the greater will. Then if that were the case, how did the outer envoy, or the envoy of the outer god and whatnot, get its hands on the Elden Ring with Plesutissax? And then why was that Plesutissax's god? This is woefully underexplored, and I think like one of the critical misses of this kind of essay so far.
Shield featuring a vividly painted Twinbird. The Twinbird is said to be the envoy of an outer god and mother of the Deathbirds. When you look at this picture in Farum Azula, you will see two birds shield. As you can see, this is clearly Twinbird, god of Farum Azula, symbolizing the duality of life and death. Think of the Twinbird as an envoy similar to how Elden Beast is an envoy to greater will. There are two specific items in the game that describes the Twinbird's contrasting qualities in this shield. A talisman adorned with red feathers, once used in ancient death rituals, and a glorious end awaits those who cling so tenaciously to life. The heart sings when one draws close to death, thus does one cling so tenaciously to life.
All right, so rather than saying life in death, I think it might help your argument and make it a bit clearer to other people if you used life from death instead.
To render up a death worth offering. The bird phoenix, reborn from its ashes in death, the duality of life and death embedded into a single realm called living in death, the primordial duality existing simultaneously. As you can see, the Twinbird, similar to how the qualities...
And so this isn't necessarily strictly related to like the Twinbirds and whatnot, because as you mentioned later on in the essay, you brought up the Regal Ancestors Remembrance, which says... Ancestral spirits exist as a phenomenon beyond the purview of the Erdtree. Life sprouts from death as it does from birth. Such is the way of the living. So, I feel death and life are two halves of the same coin, and it's not necessarily that they get life in death as much as it is like to get life from death. And I think death is a necessary component to allow new life to grow. And I think that's corroborated in all of like the poison descriptions. Wrong one. So those who dwell within poison know rot all too well. The death that begets life, that cut all equally. That is to say, it is the cycle of rebirth put into practice. So in order for something to be reborn, something first needs to die, and the Golden Order, by removing death, kind of breaks that practice, and so life isn't able to like flourish and replenish itself in the lands between, because it's been like fundamentally broken because of the Golden Order.
Of living beings were blended together in the Crucible era. In this age, death was imbued within life, not yet separated distinctly like in Marika's order. In Farum Azula...
So yeah, I would disagree and say that I do think that death was distinct, which is why you needed kinds of death that were worth offering to the Deathbirds and whatnot. And the way that I view it is most forms of death don't produce spirits, and you need to have very strong emotions to produce spirits, which could kind of go on to feed their ghost flame. And I think that's part of what the Feathered Branch Swords are trying to get at there. Hey, Without Horns, welcome back in.
The outer god of Twinbird is a doomed, crumbling realm of a relic long past. A relic long past its usefulness in Marika's Golden Order, the death-denying order of the Erdtree, feathers protruding. Those were the outer god. He was chosen by the formerly suppressed outer god of Twinbird to be its vessel for influence of the lands between via Deathroot's curse. Unlike the other demigods, Godwyn had an Erdtree burial. It was the perfect opportunity for the outer god of Twinbird to exert its influence via the Deathroot's curse of those who live in death. As you can see from the Mausoleum Knight armor, the influences of the Twinbird, who is the mother of all Deathbirds, is clear from the feathers protruding. Those wings are also directly referenced by name in the armor itself. Armor worn by headless knights who endlessly guard the wandering mausoleums. The wing-shaped ornaments in its back evoke the Deathbird, a self-inflicted curse that ties the spirits of these loyal knights to the land, having willingly beheaded themselves so that they may serve their masters in death. Similarly, when we look at the Mending Rune of the Death Prince, unlike what you might believe at first glance, this is not destined death being released back into the world, as we already did that after defeating Malekith. The Rune of Death Prince...
Okay, I do think that there's a caveat there, and that I don't think all of Destined Death is released after Malekith, because a fragment of it does already exist in the world through Deathroot, and that's kind of like one of the issues there, and I didn't catch that the first time around. Hey, Bob Andrews, can I start over from the beginning? Yeah, so in order for me to start over the beginning, first I need you to take your little slider on the YouTube bar and then pull it all the way to the left. I got you, fam.
This is different than destined death. It is the age of those who live in death, a nod to the outer god of the primordial lands, embedding the principle of life within death into the order. The Twinbird represented life and death simultaneously blended together, just like the Crucible era. Ancestral spirits exist as a phenomenon beyond the purview of the Erdtree. Life sprouts from death as it does from birth. Such is the way of the living. Coming back to Farum Azula, the golden jewels bear striking resemblance.
Okay, yeah, so he just doesn't go into a lot of the differences between what he views as in the quote-unquote life in death of the Deathbird outer god compared to like those who live in death, which is kind of unfortunate there. But all right, okay, we watched this video, so let's go ahead and move on into his next one with The Age of Perfect Order, Radagon is Marika Explained.
Last night I was sitting on the balcony and pondering Elden Ring's lore in my mind, enjoying the beauty of the stars with a cup of coffee in my hands, doing the finishing touches on my Goldmask and Corin drawing, meanwhile letting my thoughts freely drift, enjoying a nice, somber, quiet evening. Yet, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I had a profound insight into what Goldmask had realized posing the Golden Order totality gesture in the Stargazer's ruins at the end of his adventure. I realized how I was a fool thinking that the only thing Goldmask was conscious of was the Radagon is Marika plot twist. The plot twist that we have provided him back in the capital. That wasn't the answer. The questions and calculations Goldmask was pondering the entire game was far more complex and multi-layered than I've given him credit for. In this video, I'm going to explain what I've realized that night. The only way to understand Goldmask's calculations is to understand the building blocks of the Golden Order totality gesture given to us by Goldmask himself. The crucial insights are gained from the inner order and outer order gestures. After doing their respective side quests, you connect inner and outer order into a singular understanding, as Goldmask is doing in the mountaintops of the giants, to create the Golden Order totality gesture, a transcendental ideology, the truth that pierces the very Golden Order itself. First,
yeah, so before he gets into it, I'll just like give my take on it and see how much we agree or disagree. So I think having both the inner order and outer order is meant to symbolize the Golden Order's rule over both. And why I think that is important in particular is that in the time of Godfrey, Carian astrology was able to flourish, I feel, and controlled the fate in the night skies, perhaps because the Elden Ring didn't actually exert that amount of control over fate in the night skies and whatnot. And there were things that were not governed by the Order during his time. And I feel like the way that Godfrey integrated things into the Order was directly through conquest and subjugation, whereas Radagon learned to be able to control things from outside the Order by looking at the way Carian astrology was governed by the moon and how the moon could control fate and everything like that. And so if Radagon could integrate the kind of soft, gentle guidance of the moon into the order that he wanted to establish, that could bring together the inner order established directly by the Erdtree and the outer order over the cosmos by the Carians into a new perfect golden order. So that's just kind of like my quick rundown interpretation of events here. Poor brother Corin can't handle the double T-pose domination.
Let's start the conversation with Corin. Beneath a thin veneer of civility and restraint, Corin is an inflexible fundamentalist, whose uncompromising adherence to his faith renders him entirely unwilling to question it. His fervent devotion to the Golden Order compels him to seek out the noble Goldmask, a figure of great renown among the Erdtree's worshippers, in hopes of serving a greater purpose by documenting the eminent philosopher's wisdom. Corin's desperate desire for comfort and validation leaves him increasingly fearful of what awaits him at the end of his journey with Goldmask.
And I think like one of the most ironic things about that is the whole reason that Corin was able to see grace at all was because he was unwilling to recant the prophecies he had of fire within the Erdtree. So it's really ironic to me that he seems to be so rigid in his thought patterns about like supporting the order when like originally it seemed like his vision should still contravene that.
Who seeks only the absolute truth, even if the answers should threaten to unravel the entire system of beliefs upon which Golden Order was founded. The path of spirituality. See, it is of paramount to understand Goldmask is the Elden Ring's representation of the ascetic spiritual practitioners and traditions of the past. Miyazaki has perfectly encapsulated the pursuit of the absolute truth and how the consequent bastardization of its principles occur by religious zealots like Corin, turning a direct spiritual path of greater understanding into an inflexible and dogmatic religion via misinterpretation and second-hand knowledge. Religion is more of a conceptual framework that values scriptures and writing down commandments for people to follow, the path of documentation, whereas spirituality is purely an experiential pursuit of understanding, so much so in fact that Goldmask doesn't even speak to us, to not break the concentration that he builds up in his contemplations and meditations. Asceticism is a spiritual path of renouncing all material possessions and comforts to attain a deeper understanding of the nature of reality via practices like meditation and koan contemplations. That is why Goldmask is almost naked. He doesn't need clothes, social interactions, or comforts of modern society. In fact, there are tempting distractions that allure the mind and break its concentration on the subject of contemplation. Worn rags that just barely cover the body. Lord Goldmask felt no draw to the vain excess of clothing. What use is finery to one who seeks greater brilliance?
Yeah, I was literally about to pause the video and bring up this description to just kind of support what Ontos is saying right here.
The noble Goldmask is so deep in his connection to the Golden Order that he communicates exclusively in the language of the fingers, a wordless system of gestures and signs only known to a select few. As a tarnished himself, Goldmask is granted a new lease on life by blessing of the grace and summoned to the lands between. However, rather than seek the Elden Throne directly, he sets out on a pilgrimage to learn the ultimate truth of the Golden Order, hoping to correct its imperfections and bring an end to the perpetual suffering brought by the shattering event. When we first see Goldmask in the Altus Plateau, he is contemplating the true nature of the Golden Order, yet he is still at the very beginning of his contemplations. After this point, you head over and speak with Corin, and he says how he's in search of a scholar known as Goldmask and beg him for his instructions.
Do you sport with me?
The funny thing is, when I first played through this, I had met Goldmask first, and then I kind of like ran into Corin, and I never talked to him in the round table hold for him to tell me about the whole like Goldmask situation. So then that dialogue came up, and I had no idea what the hell was going on, and then like Corin just disappeared, and I was so confused. And then Chadwick said, in Fist of the North Star, when we meet Toki, he's also in the state that like Goldmask is in, though that's about where those similarities stop. You mean you don't remember summoning Goldmask to help you fight Raoul? I mean, Radon?
From your description, it can be no other than the Goldmask himself. Of course, I knew he would be close by. Bless the Golden Order and its benevolent rays. And to you too, my sincerest thanks. Through you.
After you find Goldmask on the path above and tell Corin of his location, everyone gathers around and Corin asks you to speak quietly to not.
You know, it's a kind of interesting design element. It's that even on their prophet robes, that like the little symbol of what is supposed to represent the two fingers is kind of broken. So that might be a bit of like a visual hint to not implicitly trust everything like the two fingers says, and that they were bent and broken long ago.
Everyone gathers around and Corin asks you to speak quietly to not mess up Master Goldmask's cogitations.
Ah, we meet yet again. Thanks to you, I have become acquainted with the noble Goldmask himself, and taken my place by his side, as you can see. Have no fear. I will still teach you incantations as before, though we must do so quietly, such that we not disturb the great master's cogitation.
Pay attention to how Goldmask still hasn't moved his arms in this location. He still didn't have a breakthrough and is at the beginning of his cogitations. Next, you will find Goldmask and Corin on the east side of the Colosseum facing.
Don't you like talk to him and get inner order or outer order there? I don't remember. I think you get something from him if you talk to him, but maybe not. I don't remember.
The giant Erdtree directly.
Oh, was that you? Sorry, but I hardly noticed. I'm a little shaken since the master ceased his movements.
Maybe Melina gives us one.
The master's reflections had heightened as we neared the Erdtree, while still a precise calculus. The rhythms grew increasingly wild until he simply ceased. Now the master is facing quite the puzzle. The Golden Order is founded on the principle that Marika is the one true god. However, the name of Marika's second husband, King Consort Radagon, also appeared.
And so this is something that also leads to me believing that Radagon has to be integral to the Golden Order. And of course, while Radagon is Marika, and people could argue that that's part of the reason why his name appears, I feel as though this is a conceit, not like what people are saying, but like in that Radagon is the driving force behind Marika's establishment of the Golden Order. And I feel like if all of this other stuff surrounding the Golden Order existed with Godfrey, that his name should have potentially appeared alongside Marika's. But yeah, if Marika is the one true god and that's what the Golden Order is founded upon, I think the only way that could be feasible is if it's incorporating Marika and Radagon as one, which doesn't seem to have been the case in the Godfrey times. I mean, they should have been one at that point, but you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really seem as though Radagon was around then.
Who exactly was Radagon? The master is stumped. His finger has remained still ever since Radagon's name was discovered.
Since we've now talked to Corin, let's first investigate the gesture Goldmask is doing. He is doing the outer order gesture. This is telling us where Goldmask is at with his contemplations, his current realizations, the amount of work he did up until this point. So, what is this outer order? We get this gesture from Melina herself, in this minor Erdtree church where there are 3 golden-hued minor Erdtrees. If you watched my previous video on Miquella, you will be familiar with the purpose and lore implications of this location. This is very important to understand, but for the purposes of this argument, here is a shortened summary and how you acquire the outer order.
Spoken echoes linger here, words of Queen Marika, who vanished long ago. My comrades, why must ye falter?
Basically, Minor Erdtree Church is an experimentation ground for Marika and Miquella to ingest unalloyed gold in the Erdtree roots for it to regain the reincarnation abilities it once lost when the Age of Plenteous came to an end.
And I have like a lot of disagreements with that, and I believe I watched that video on stream and like have already covered it, so I'll just like leave that there for now.
In order to understand this aspect of the lore accurately, please watch my Miquella video previously. With Marika's quote here, it is clear the insight Goldmask had in this Minor Erdtree Church is the unalloyed golden hue of the Minor Erdtree, and how it is so different than all the other ones. Goldmask has realized the meaning of "those blissful early days are long past," and to
Alright, I can't leave it alone after all. So this whole thing of tying Miquella to this church specifically is problematic, especially with unalloyed gold brought into the mix, because you open yourself up to questions of when you believe this tree was created. And well, I'm of the opinion that these kind of minor Erdtrees like predate the shattering by a significant margin. Other people disagree for like many other reasons, and they believe that these minor Erdtrees are the products of the golden seeds, which only were scattered after the shattering. And if you believe that theory, that these are post-shattering phenomena, then it doesn't make sense for Miquella and Marika to be working on this tree if Marika is decreeing her search of the depths of the Golden Order to increase the bounty of their grace, because that should be something that is kind of incidental, I think, with the creation of the Golden Order, and the move away from the blind belief of the Erdtree and Erdtree worship era and into the fundamentalism and scholarship of the Golden Order era, with Radagon more specifically. Without Horn says, you think it's funny you can get the Goldmask off a body of the broken bridge you find him on? Did his last attendant just slip and fall? Who's to say that that's Goldmask's last attendant? Maybe that was the real Goldmask. Dun dun dun.
And how it is so different than all the other ones. Goldmask has realized the meaning of "those blissful early days are long past," and to remedy this, unalloyed gold has been injected into these 3 separate Erdtrees in this church. This was the first puzzle piece, unalloyed gold.
And for what it's worth, the depiction on the, what's it called, the icon shield, kind of shows trees of a similar nature than these.
It was the integral substance to the fabric of the Golden Order, and potentially the missing addition to the current Golden Order fundamentalism Goldmask himself was a practitioner of. This was a novel way to perfect the Golden Order, yet the mechanics of how this unalloyed gold is created or integrated into the Order remains a mystery to Goldmask. As Goldmask is surely aware, in the alchemical perspective, mercury and sulfur needs to be conjoined for the Philosopher's Stone to be created. Unless that process has been implemented, the resulting gold will be a false one, an impure one, nothing more than a deceptive appearance. This is a conundrum indeed. Now, with this understanding in mind, this recontextualizes Corin's words previously.
The Master's reflections had heightened as we neared the Erdtree, while still a precise calculus. The rhythms grew increasingly wild until he simply ceased. Now the Master is facing quite the puzzle. The Golden Order is founded on the principle that Marika is the one true god. However, the name of Marika's second husband, King Consort Radagon, also appeared. Who exactly was Radagon? The Master is stumped. His finger has remained still ever since Radagon's name was discovered. Curse my mediocre mind. The Master only has me. And here I fail him.
You fail him, Corin, because the puzzle piece Goldmask is missing at this phase of the contemplation resides within the inner order gesture. And to understand the inner order, we need to understand the D brothers. Darien, more commonly known as D, Hunter of the Dead, is a hunter who is tasked with putting those who live in death to rest by Beast clergyman Malekith himself to erase the defilements to the Golden Order. Marika's reign has started by sealing destined to death, and those who live in death lay outside of its principles and paradigms. It needs to be erased for Marika's Golden Order to be restored. He challenges this worldview immediately with the Order healing incantation. The noble Goldmask lamented what had become of the hunters. How easy it is for learning and learnedness to be reduced to the ravings of fanatics. All the good and great wanted in their foolishness was an absolute evil to contend with. Does such a notion exist in the fundamentals of order? What we've just described previously is the propaganda and the brainwashing Malekith has infested these hunters to uproot all the visages of the Rune of Death from the lands between. The consequences of the destined death infesting Godwyn's body. This is a viewpoint that directly opposes the core tenets of the Golden Order fundamentalism, the law of causality and regression. As you can see, Goldmask is rejecting the idea that absolute evil or absolute benevolence exists in reality. Unlike the fanatic nature of the hunters, Goldmask realizes that all aspects of life contain some elements of good and bad, and each element should be viewed within the proper context, including Godwyn's death and his consequent turning into this abomination, the Rune of...
So I don't necessarily believe that Goldmask thinks there's good and evil, and I feel like for him personally that's kind of irrelevant when the whole tenet of the Golden Order fundamentalism is based on scholarship and intellect and learning and logic and all that stuff. And so for him, the question of good and evil doesn't really matter. And so people are getting distracted by what they think is evil when the real question is what exists part of the order. And I believe Goldmask would make the argument that there can be nothing beyond the order because the order is kind of everything, which is why he seeks to perfect it the way that he does. And he thinks that Marika / Radagon, well, really Jessica, turning her back on the order was the real imperfection of it, because everything within the order is perfect because order is perfect. That's kind of my take on it.
Including Godwyn's death and his consequent turning into this abomination, the Rune of Death, and those who live in death. Now it is time to explore the other half of the same coin. Darien has a twin brother by the name of Devin, who is also called D, the Beholder of Death. You find him down in the underground location in the Siofra Rivers, and he provides you with the inner order gesture when you give him the twin set armor.
You know, I didn't know he was called Beholder of Death, but that's probably because I play HUDless a lot for the purpose of gathering footage. So I'm glad to learn that.
Provides you with the inner order gesture when you give him the twin set armor. While Darien and Devon had different minds and bodies, they shared a single soul and were reviled as cursed beings. However, the twins found sanctuary in the Golden Order, the only institution to accept them. Sword forged by compounding silver and gold, a sacred weapon to hunt those who live in death. The inseparable twins found solace in the Golden Order, the only institution not to revile them as accursed beings. Armor depicting entwined twins of gold and silver. The two known as D are inseparable twins. They are of two bodies and two minds, but one single soul. Not once do they stand together. Not one word do they speak to one another. Perhaps this armor longs to find its way to the other D. Now keep this armor.
Alright, so this isn't like terribly important, but I pretty much bring it up anytime it comes up because I know it has misled a bunch of people over, the almost 2 years that the game's been out now. So with the twinned armor set, rather than saying that they have two minds as it does in the English here, two bodies and two minds, the Japanese says they have two bodies, and then two wills. Not that. Two wills. And I think that's going to be important because will is something that seems to be relating to body and is important in other contexts. And I think the idea of mind in particular is supposed to be related to soul, but that's not ever really made fully explicit. And I think like mind and mindfulness is kind of like the stat that comes into play when dealing with like spirit ashes and using FP to summon them and all that stuff.
Armor and its design in mind because it's not only heavily linked with the inseparable sword, but also the contemplation Goldmask is currently trying to understand in the capital. If you were observant before, I have already given you the answer. The solution to the riddle resides in the previous line. The inseparable twins found solace in the Golden Order, the only institution not to revile them as accursed beings. This sentence holds a second key to understanding Goldmask's contemplation, the missing piece of the puzzle. Don't you think that it is suspect that the Golden Order, who is literally opposed to all manners of beastly freaks from the Misbegottens to Albinorics and abominations that are imprisoned within the shunning grounds below the capital sewers. It is no secret at this point that Marika disdains all manners of freaks and curseborns. However, the peculiar condition of Darien and Devon, being of two bodies yet one soul, is not regarded as a curse by Marika's Golden Order. In fact, let alone giving a punishment, Marika's order provides Darien with a secure job and welcomes these brothers with arms into its capitalistic structure. Unless Marika has seen something in the condition of these two twins, she would not give them the special treatment, something that she can easily relate to. The king consort Radagon and the eternal queen Marika and their inseparable connection. This right here was the moment where Goldmask was trying to understand Radagon's relationship to Marika. Darien and Devon are not just a profound analogy to Radagon and Marika, but also the other curseborn twins, Melania and Miquella, which is why when we give the twin set armor to D, Miyazaki gives us the inner order gesture, the missing piece of the puzzle. How Darien and Devon's being one soul is the foreshadowed analogy to Radagon is Marika plot twist. And all we have to do to provide this insight to Goldmask is to use the law of regression spell on the statue. And
what on earth did you do to...
Alright, so I don't know if he's going to cover it, so I'll just cover it now on the off chance he does not. But another aspect of the twinned armor set, which I think is worth consideration, is that it's a helm or armor depicting entwined twins of gold and silver. And so I believe that gold is supposed to represent the house of the Erdtree, and that silver is supposed to represent things affiliated with the night sky and potentially the moon, even though there aren't a lot of those connections that are super readily available when you look at the Ray Lucarian stuff. But this extends a bit further when you look at things like the Nox and how they created Albinorix. And unfortunately, that kind of connection isn't going to be the clearest based off of the English use of the word Albinoric. But nonetheless, if you go beyond Albinoric and focus on Silver Tears particularly, then I think you can kind of begin to see the connection between the Night and Silver, and that's kind of made a bit more explicit in something like the Silver Firefly, where it says, the light of fireflies is believed to have an alluring magic. Silver light is considered to invite riches awaiting us. It's found near bodies of cold water untouched by sunlight. So no sunlight equals night equals silver. And so gold plus silver, that's kind of something I think is inherent within the Brothers D.
To the Master? Well, not that I'm complaining. Master's finger moves again, resuming his cogitation. More than good enough for me. I haven't the words to thank you. So I'd like to pass this on to you instead. A glimpse into the heart of the Golden Order. Documented by yours truly. To think that Radagon was Marika herself. Or at least, such is all I can interpret from the rhythm and calculus of his finger. How would such a thing even have been possible, I wonder? Sadly, I cannot comprehend it myself. Do you have a fuller understanding of the matter? Oh. Well, either way, I can continue my documentation. In truth, it matters very little whether I understand the Master's thoughts or not. I am merely his scribe. It is my sole and unwavering purpose.
That is enough for Goldmask to understand the rest of the logic. How one of the hunters, Devin, who he was challenging his worldview in the Order of Healing spell, actually had the missing piece all along to understand Radagon is Marika plot twist. How Radagon is Marika's other inseparable half, who has always desired to be complete his entire life. As the Radagon's icon makes it clear, a legendary talisman depicting the Elden Lord Radagon. As the husband of Renala of Caria, the red-haired Radagon studied sorcery, and as the husband of Queen Marika, he studied incantations. Thus did the hero aspire to be complete. The non-dual union with Marika. That's what Radagon desired his entire life. The spiritual union, not the conceptual.
So, I feel like that's going like a step beyond what the text is saying here, but I think the really important part is even if you wanted that union with Marika, first, I do believe it is of utmost importance that he needed Renala's sorcery to get himself into a more complete state. And as far as the term complete here is considered, the Japanese comes from kanzen, which does mean complete, but it also has connotations of perfection, more so than complete, perhaps. And that is, I believe, supposed to tie into the perfection and imperfection of the Golden Order in general. And that whole idea of Radagon striving for perfection, I think, is supposed to be mirrored in things like Litany of Proper Death, and why Goldmask would betray a suspicion of the quote-unquote holism of the Golden Order, the completion or the perfection of the Golden Order.
The spiritual union, not the conceptual. In Jungian psychology, the term rubido is perfectly aligned with Radagon himself. Rubido is a Latin word for redness and explains the process that allows an individual to attain the integration of opposites, their transcendence, and finally, emergence of an undifferentiated unconscious. In the archetypal, rubido represents the self-archetype, and the self manifests itself in the wholeness, a point in which a person discovers their true nature, a process called reunification, which entails the reunion of body, soul, and spirit, leading to a diminished inner conflict. Radagon, as the self-archetype in Jungian psychology, desired all his life to be complete and reunified with his other half Marika, leading to diminished inner conflict, as evident from the lore itself, where Radagon wanted to mend the Elden Ring and Marika wanted to shatter it. After the union with Marika, Radagon's resistance slowly evaporated and the inner conflict diminished, eventually giving into Marika's temptation to become one, unable to stop Marika, shattering the Elden Ring and the consequent containment of the metaphysical that is the Elden Ring within their corporeal non-dual body.
So he said something a little bit off there to me in that he gave into Marika's temptation to become one. For what it's worth, we're never shown whether or not Radagon ever had his own body or his own kind of autonomy separate from that of Marika. So I feel like that is just kind of a bit of a loaded statement to make without setting up some expectations, perhaps.
Into Marika's temptation to become one, unable to stop Marika, shattering the Elden Ring and the consequent containment of the metaphysical that is the Elden Ring within their corporeal non-dual body. This is the profound truth and connection Goldmask has realized when we told him Radagon is Marika in the capital. Afterwards, Corin is really happy. Goldmask can continue his contemplations. Now we arrive at the final contemplation. This plot twist, Radagon is Marika, is not the final answer.
Scowlies, he says, hold up, quick aside, Liza P just got an update. They added an entire weapon and changed P organs respecing to be free from the beginning of the game. That's cool. It's nice that it's still being updated.
Corin makes it clear in his dialogue. Master's finger moves again, resuming his cogitation. More than good enough for me. Goldmask is still in the process of understanding how the inner order and outer order can be conjoined and result in a singular greater understanding that can perfect the Golden Order itself. Before Goldmask spoils the answer for us, let's figure it out together. When you combine the truths of the inner order and outer order, the realization will dawn on you.
Megazord.
Inner order is Marika and Radagon's union, described as an analogy to Darien and Devon's conditions. Outer order was the representation of unalloyed gold in the Erdtree roots to bring back reincarnation.
I would strongly disagree with that.
Now I want you to combine both and arrive at an answer. The transcendental ideology that will perfect the Golden Order. Miquella, the inventor of unalloyed gold and the child of the union of Radagon and Marika. See, Goldmask had the same realization with the Golden Order totality at the end of his pilgrimage when we find...
Alright, so I was thinking about bringing this up earlier in the video, but it didn't seem like a good time. But the existence of Miquella and Malenia is part of the reason why I believe the Golden Order is more specific to Radagon, because I think them and their curse represent part of the flaws of the Golden Order and removing life from death, and that's why I tend to believe that the removal of destined death or the rune of death is more along the lines of when Radagon ascended the Elden Throne, and once death was removed, it started to create new problems in that people couldn't fully mature in the case of Miquella, or that life itself had become a cancer because of its boundless growth in the case of Malenia. And so trying to suggest that Miquella is like the end goal of the Golden Order might be true to a kind of extent, because he is supposed to be an Empyrean, the most fearsome of all, perhaps. But I don't think the way that he's framing this argument is something that I can agree with implicitly.
realization with the Golden Order totality at the end of his pilgrimage when we find him in the Stargazer ruins in the mountaintops of the Giants, in the same location Miquella's Erdtree resides. If you look at the map of Stargazer ruins where we find Gold,
I'm not entirely sure that's fair because, I mean, this is also where the kiln of the fire giants is, and he's not particularly close to either the Erdtree or the kiln. He's just kind of gotten, like, the best vantage of the Erdtree that he possibly could, aside from being, like, directly next to it.
Goldmask. You can see the two bridges.
And yeah, actually, Corin mentions that, like, the Forbidden Mount of Fire, so it seems like way more of a connection to the fire giants to me than the Erdtree. And with all of the prophecies of fire within the tree, it just seems to be a lot more relevant overall.
And ruins are shaped as the T-pose from the Golden Order totality, a set of ruins found in the central mountaintops of the Giants. The plateau it is sitting on is located between two bridges.
Alright, so this is like some real Rorschach type stuff that I'm just, I don't care for.
When you speak with Corin, he is in utter disbelief and fear.
Nice to see you. I can't believe you've come all this way. I've been gripped by a terrifying thought. The rhythms and calculus of the Master's finger betray a suspicion of the holism of the Golden Order, a conceit, I am afraid, that cannot be overlooked. Oh, but how could this be? I dread to even entertain the possibility, but somehow I cannot cast aside my doubts about the Master. Tell me, have I simply lost my head? Only, if the Master were true to the Golden Order, why would he think to breach this forbidden mount of fire? Oh, Master, put my mind at ease. Dispel these fearsome thoughts. I want to place my trust in you, to be your scribe.
You know what's really funny about that? Like, Goldmask should be able to hear our boy, but he just don't give a damn. That's cold. Colder than the mountains he's standing on.
The significance of the Stargazer ruins can further be explained by the Oracle Envoys that resides in Miquella's Erdtree, spirits of a monstrous band of musicians who employ sacred arts. It is said that when Oracle Envoys appear playing their pipes, they do so to herald the arrival of a new god. Their god, the true Empyrean, is Miquella, and Goldmask is here at the Stargazer ruins to see the true Empyreans rise to ascension. Rune discovered by the noble Goldmask, used to restore the fractured Elden Ring when brandished by the Elden Lord. A rune of transcendental ideology which will attempt to perfect the Golden Order. The current imperfection of the Golden Order or instability of ideology can be blamed upon the fickleness of the gods no better than men. That is the fly in the ointment. That transcendental ideology Goldmask has realized is embodied within Miquella, who has hermaphrodite qualities of male and female in a single body.
And again, I strongly disagree with that, and I would argue that Goldmask doesn't want a god, and so Miquella would be antithetical to what Goldmask is striving for, and it's completely divorced from the kind of mending rune that you get, which Goldmask seeks to overthrow the gods because they are fickle and they are no better than men. That's kind of like the whole point of his little questline there, in my opinion. Hey, Elden Enthusiast, welcome on in. Yeah, so this person goes over Egyptian mythology, but that'll be the next video we watch.
The perfect union of mercury and sulfur. And if you still do not see the connection, here is the final nail in the coffin. Golden Epitaph. A sword made to commemorate the death of Godwyn the Golden, first of the demigods to die, infused with the humble prayer of a young boy. O brother, Lord brother, please die a true death. If you look carefully at its tip, you will see a familiar face. Goldmask himself. Miquella respected the teachings of Goldmask, and he decided to engrave Goldmask in his own Golden Order totality gesture. In Goldmask's Mending Rune of Perfect Order, Goldmask says, "The fickleness of the gods know better than men." Marika tried to shatter the Elden Ring and Radagon tried to mend it, illustrating how the ensuing Age of Order under Goldmask's vision will integrate the new wisdom of the transcendental Golden Order fundamentalism, a nod to the true Empyrean of the Golden Order. Ultimately, Goldmask's theoretical vision.
I feel like this is just kind of a bad argument to make because Miquella abandoned fundamentalism. So if Goldmask is chasing after Miquella, Goldmask is woefully misinformed. And I feel like this theory just doesn't really tread water. Hey Otoako, welcome back to stream. Yeah, because it's a skeleton on top of the thing. At first I thought he was going to mention that it kind of looks like he's doing Golden Order totality, but for what it's worth, even if it was doing Golden Order totality, at one point Miquella was a fundamentalist, but yeah, I don't really think this works. Without the gold mask, there's no way to know if that's Goldmask. Well said.
Is the best an age can accomplish without Miquella's ascension to the throne.
Yeah, Otoako asks, also, why only associate Golden Order Totality's emote with Goldmask just because he gets it? You can see statues of Radagon doing the pose everywhere. To be fair, that is not what Onto has said. I was just kind of extrapolating based off of where I thought he was going to go with the Golden Epitaph, but he did not really go that direction, to be fair to him there. I do like how, though, in Goldmask's ending, the Erdtree, or it's the only one where the Erdtree glows on the inside and the outside as you look at it from the outside. It's just uniformly gold.
How a tarnished became Elden Lord in our home across the fog, the lands between.
Yeah, I agree that I think it's weird to think that Goldmask is the dude on the Golden Epitaph. Especially because, he should have been tarnished and not even in the lands between. So it's really awkward to me to suggest that Miquella would be... would have, some kind of familiarity with Goldmask or his teachings when he shouldn't have even been in the lands between if he's one of, Godfrey's tarnished and all that. Oops.
The age of order.
Hello everyone, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, comment, and subscribe. Goldmask's ending was one of the most underexplored subjects in the lore community. Considering its depth, hopefully I was able to convey its significance to the greater narrative of Elden Ring. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
I'm a bit disappointed because there was a lot of this video that I liked, especially going through the relationship between the brothers D and the Golden Order. I thought that stuff was actually really on point, and then it just kind of took a hard left turn into the Miquella stuff, which I don't really think works out for a number of reasons. So I'm actually not going to like it just because, man, it really feels bad to get like teed up to like hit a home run only for you to like foul out instead. Hey, Amara Benadryl, welcome back to stream. If you think about all the errors, tree endings similar to Mass Effect endings, but this time the world didn't go nuclear about it, funny enough. So, yeah, I mean, but to be fair, like FromSoft has always had really terrible endings in their games, so it's just kind of like tradition at this point, and people are huffing copium that there'll be more content to kind of make up for it. Elden Enthusiast says, speaking of unexplored, they think that the sun is the real underexplored topic in Elden Ring. I definitely agree with that, because there's a lot of different ways you could go with the sun, but not a lot to support you with whatever direction you go. Otoako never thought about how the D-Bros connect to the Golden Order like that. Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite details about like the Golden Order, and I really do think them having two bodies, two wills, and one soul is very significant, but also because their armor is a symbol of the Golden Order because they're like hunters of the Golden Order, and the fact that their armor is comprised of gold and silver I think is extremely important when gold kind of symbolizes like the sun and the day, and silver like symbolizes night. I think that's supposed to show that the Golden Order is symbolized through Radagon representing the House of the Erdtree, and Renala and her magic comprising the silver portion with the House of the Moon and whatnot. Oh no, detail. He got me. It helps that the Frenzied Flame and Rondi endings are something beyond just the color filter endings. Yeah, I agree. Hey, Billy Deerhead, welcome on in. You've come to suspect that Melina was born a goddess of fire and hidden away from the Golden Order until she reemerged as the Glow-Eyed Queen. She fights more with golden flames. There's a lot to work with. Well, that's kind of a lie. There's not a lot to work with Melina, which allows like the imagination to run wild. And it really sucks, even though like it offers like a lot of creative freedom, because so many views are kind of incompatible with how she could potentially work. Because like you could make the argument, as I have at times, that Melina could be the daughter of Marika in the sense that like she's more like Millicent is to Millennia than a traditional daughter, since she's never like allegedly been born. You can make the argument that she's the Glow-Eyed Queen because of, you know, like everything with the eye and whatnot. And you could even make the tinfoil argument that Marika was Melina and was also the Glow-Eyed Queen, kind of similarly to how Radagon is Marika and is Elden Lord. But yeah, there's just a lot of ambiguity as to her story there. Melina is Velka. I don't know if Melina is Velka. I feel like Marika is kind of like Velka, to be honest. But yeah, everybody's Velka. Let's be real here. Elden thinks that Marika and the Greater Will did the sun dirty, since gold is so tied to it in the alchemy, yet sunflowers face the Erdtree now. Maybe. Especially with the Dung Eater medallion and everything. Oh yeah, no, I definitely don't buy the expansion coming this month. We need answers. I mean, the real copium that you can huff right now is trying to hold out hope for a trailer on the anniversary, but I mean, I'm a very skeptical person and I don't believe anything until after it comes out. And even then, I'm still a little bit skeptical just because of, waiting for frickin' 10 years only to have Final Fantasy Versus 13 not be the game that was promised, and Final Fantasy 15 to be the game that got delivered. So, yeah, I'm a little bit jaded and maybe a little bit salty about stuff like that. All right. So let's go ahead and transition into Egyptian mythology, Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree DLC predictions by Ontos. Billy Deerhead says the data files refer to her as Marika daughter, plus her name fits in well with Miquella and Mania, and she seems to have Radagon-like hair, plus the butterflies suggest a connection with them. However, I will say that daughter of Marika is not how the Japanese for that reads, and it's more along the lines of Musume Marika, which can mean Lady Marika, not daughter. That's just kind of one of the idiosyncrasies of the Japanese language. Whereas if it were Marika no Musume, it'd be closer to Marika's daughter. So, if anything, the internal files suggest that Melina is Marika, like a maiden of Marika, or like Marika as a maiden, more specifically. And maiden as in like a lady sense, not like the finger maiden sense, by the way. Hey Zero, welcome back into stream. How you doing? Yeah, Marika's spirit. That is one thought that I definitely had about Marika, because when you visit her in the Erdtree, she's a husk. Like, she's not really there anymore, or so it seems. And so if you keep that in mind, then maybe it is plausible that Melina could be like Marika's spirit. But if Marika has like a multi-body, multi-spirit type thing going on, maybe that could explain things. All right, let's go into the next one. Egyptian mythology, Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree DLC prediction. Speculation time.
If the following analysis is correct, then I've realized Miyazaki's vision and will be telling you about the potential 7 bosses we'll be fighting in the DLC and the exact identity of the final boss fight, along with the main plot of the DLC in broad strokes. Pray tell, what could you possibly infer from a single picture? Well, Miyazaki, how much can an individual decipher the lore of a DLC by looking at a single picture? In here, Miyazaki is spoiling way more than you think. But you need to have an extensive knowledge of historical mythologies to connect a bundle of information into something more meaningful than the sum of its parts. See, when I look at what people have been speculating and discussing about Shadow of the Erdtree for the past year or so, I'm not sure we're fully moving forward with the ideas, creating a coherent narrative. Whether I can accurately predict what will happen in this DLC depends entirely on whether I understand what this location refers to, what inspired Miyazaki while creating this wheat field. This is the field of reeds, described in the Egyptian mythology. Reeds is a synonym for grain, a tall, slender-leaved plant of the grass family, which grows in water or marshy grounds. See, in Egyptian mythology, the land of reeds is an heavenly paradise ruled by Osiris, an Egyptian god, a location you can normally arrive after the death of the body. So, the question is, how is Miquella able to enter the land of reeds as we know he is not dead, sleeping soundly in his cocoon?
So I feel like if you're familiar with the lore of a game like Bloodborne, this is pretty easily accessible, because even beyond like Bloodborne, in general, there's a kind of mythos behind the idea of sleep and dreams as being a kind of mediary or interground. Anyway, a mediary between like life and death, and people are often not exactly conscious as though they're alive, but they're not unconscious as though they're dead either, which is why dreams are like hold such a powerful place in the human psyche. And so with Miquella being able to exist within the dream as Saint Trina and control it to some degree, it makes a lot of sense that the land of reeds, if we want to call it that, could be analogous to the kind of dreamlands or something along those lines. But even like setting that stuff aside, it doesn't necessarily have to be like the dream stuff, because we do have confirmation of a so-called like spirit realm or another realm within Helfin Steeple. And its description, I may as well pull it up for you guys, I suppose. So let me do this. All right. So this is a great sword patterned after the black steeple of the Helfin, the lampwood, which guides the dead of this spirit world. So spirit world here, I believe, let me double check it. I'm blind. Oh yeah. Oh no, it's definitely spirit world. I couldn't remember if this was Ikai or Reikai, but it's Reikai, which is very explicitly like spirit or ghost world. So yeah, there is a ghost world in Elden Ring that we may not have touched the surface of yet. Helfin Steeple sure gets a lot of screen time on my streams. I mean, it's something that gets brought up quite a lot, and we should have like a last protagonist stream bingo, lore bingo. What would be the free space? Oh, the Japanese. Yeah, that'd be free. Chadwick said, Ghost World has touched you to death a lot in Elden Ring. Now, I don't know if you're like making a reference to the movie or I actually have no idea what you're saying. Hey, Eliza, welcome into stream. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And good luck with the gaming. Oh, you've been killed by ghosts. Okay, I see what you mean. Otoako says the Field of Reeds could all just be a reference to the Gladiator movie. Are you not entertained? Chadwick asks, what is the Tibia Mariner? That's a really good question because mechanically the Tibia Mariner is not those who live in death. And according to like the Tibia's summons, it doesn't summon those who live in death either. I mean, mechanically it does, but it's supposed to summon those lost in death. So Tibia Mariners are most likely something which predates the whole Golden Order and potentially even the Erdtree as well. And they might be related to Rosis, but they seem to be able to guide people to where they need to go in death is kind of what I think their original purpose was supposed to be. But what they're doing now is kind of anyone's guess because we don't really know if the Lands Between has been disconnected from the Reikai or Spirit World because of like the removal of Destined Death, and that's one thought that's come across my mind. It's possible the catacombs were also like part of a more prehistoric burial practice, and that the dead were actually supposed to be guided to the catacombs, and then from the catacombs maybe they'd be able to visit the Spirit World. I don't really know. Yeah, they definitely seem to have a visual inspiration in like the Karen from Greek mythology. Hey, Tony Pepperoni, nice to see you again. And yeah, Billy brings up a great question of if the Empyreans are supposed to have wolfmen as shadows, what about those of Miquella and Melania, or the Gex shadow for that matter? So I think the reason that Mick and Melly don't have Beastmen is because they weren't necessarily chosen by the Fingers to be Empyreans, and they may have actually become Empyreans due to heredity of being born from a single person god. Because Marika and Radagon are god. The way that works in Japanese is you have like the character for god, Kami, and the character for Empyrean is like Shinjin, which I guess that doesn't make like a lot of sense if I just say it out loud. So let me pull up G-Show for you guys. So we have Kami, not for paper, but Kami as in God. And then if you take Kami as in God and add the character Hito, which means like person, or yeah, person's good. So you take God plus person, you get Shinjin, which means, well, it can mean gods and men, but it's really supposed to be like a god person, aka a divine being. And this is Empyrean. And so if Marika is God and Radagon is God, then Miquella and Melania and their DNA is technically like 100% divine. So they're kind of like god people through heredity in a way that the Karian children, who are like half god people because of like Renala's genes and whatnot, are not. And so they may not have needed to have been selected by the fingers. That's kind of the way that I reconcile that. But even saying that, one interesting thing to consider is that Millennia often refers to herself as the Blade of Miquella, and she could kind of metaphorically be serving as the stand-in for his shadow, but who really knows? It's not Kami for turtle, that's Kame, like Kamehameha. It's like turtle wave, although it's kind of a made-up word. And then Amar says, Vargrim tried to become the Gloam-Eyed Queen shadow, but you don't think that's how it worked. So yeah, we don't necessarily know if he tried to become her shadow or if he was just trying to emulate her shadow, but that is the most common belief because he does have the Gloam-Eyed Queen's God Slayer's greatsword in his possession. All right, thanks. You told Max that I was reacting to one of his videos. Honestly, he's put out a lot of content that I want to like look at, and I was thinking of like watching some of them pretty soon in the future, to be honest. I didn't know he had Discord. I'll need to like look for it or something. You like that they're Lothric and Lorien 2.0 with the twins? Okay. All right, so let's go back to the video now.
To understand this seeming contradiction, you need to realize what sleep represents within the proper context. The contribution of ancient Egypt to the field of sleep medicine is quite evident. The concept of sleep had been linked to death, and the Egyptians were the first to describe the similarity between dreams and awakenings. Dream interpretation and analysis had been extensively practiced by thousands of years before the modern psychoanalytic theories. Sleep was also utilized as a method for healing in special sleep temples designed for dream incubations. Early mentionings of sleep disorders and their treatments could be found in a few survived documents dealing with the ancient Egyptian medicine. The first hypnotic medication in history was prescribed by the Egyptians, who used poppy seeds, opium, to treat insomnia, headache, and as an anesthetic. It is also said that an individual who's adept in spiritual practices can access ethereal spiritual realms.
I'll be honest, like anytime I hear about poppy seeds, I just always want a freaking poppy seed muffin. They are divine.
By separating their soul from their corporeal flesh and access these realms, a form of ego death, if you will. And with this context, when we look at Miquella, it becomes obvious what he's doing in Mogwyn's palace. Miquella in his cocoon is attempting to access the land of reeds, the land of those who live in death, in the hopes of contacting Godwyn's lost soul. Most people are so sure that this will be the land of reeds before the shattering, during the shattering, or some even saying it will be post-game. Now, although we see Miquella's childlike body in this picture, this doesn't quite make sense, as Miquella's current body in the game is highly morphed and changed as a result of the shards bolstered old demigods and their physical forms. Now, if you want to...
Like, that's kind of a weird sentence. Maybe he, like, spliced audio and, like, came up messed up. Anyway, although I do think this is a really good chance that this is Miquella depicted on, the promotional art. There is the chance that this is not Miquella as well. Marika is another popular contender, like potentially Marika before she gained the Elden Ring or whatever is going on in this trailer, or not trailer, pictured, like nobody knows. But it's also possible this isn't Torrent, but another goat horse, Yakul, that's completely unrelated to Torrent. Doesn't Mia have similar hair too? Kind of, but I mean, I can't zoom in on this image specifically, but if you zoom in, you can see like the same amount of... I have this available really quick. You can see the same amount of braids that are on Miquella's hair in the intro cutscene. Wait, why don't I just make this bigger? I can make it go to 11. So yeah, I do think there's a very strong possibility, but like everything in Elden Ring, it's not concrete. So can't wait for Miyazaki to spoof all of us and actually reveal the character behind the flame butterflies, Molecular. I don't know.
As Miquella's current body in the game is highly morphed and changed as a result of the shards bolstered old demigods and their physical forms. Now, if you want to understand how this bolstering of the demigods occur using the Elden Ring as a metaphysical substrate, you can do so here in my Marika video. I'm here to tell you that the location of the DLC is not the lands between as we know it, and it's not even strictly speaking Miquella's dream, as that is the method of access. This is the land of those who live in death, the spirit world of the Twinbird, the envoy beast of the outer god Nigredo of Farum Azula. If you want to learn more about Twinbird, you can watch my Farum Azula episode here. See, we already know Miquella's aim from the base game, a sword made to commemorate the death of Godwyn the Golden, first of the demigods to die, infused with the humble prayer of a young boy. "O brother, Lord brother, please die a true death." This single item description will completely throw you off and give the wrong impression that Miquella desires to kill Godwyn with hostile intentions. This is not the case. Giving someone a true death is a special phrase utilized by the Golden Order nobility and is not the same as destined death. The stranded souls provide short dialogues that...
So I'm not sure where exactly he's getting the claim that true death is used by the nobility in particular. I think that's bullcrap, but maybe he'll have the text to support it.
That give the proper context of historical periods of the lands between. One of them in Stormfoot Catacombs lays it out for us. A proper death means returning to the Erdtree. Have patience until the time comes and the roots call to you. So, proper death allows for someone to die completely, making sure that they're no longer bound by the spirit world of those who live in death and giving them a chance to be reborn via the Erdtree burials. The Litany of Proper Death. This incantation is especially damaging to those who live in death. Any felled by this incantation cannot be revived. Now again, if you mistakenly interpret revival in this sentence as the same as Erdtree reincarnation we've just spoken about, you will be very confused. What is regarded by those who live in death not being revived is the revival when we hit them with the weapon when they come back to life, unable to properly die. And this spell allows for souls to have a proper death first, preventing this revival mechanic and allowing them to be reincarnated with an Erdtree burial as shown in the Catacombs dungeon door. Just as the Ghost in Castle Soul refers Miquella's desire to give Godwyn a true death and his consequent revival. And the method of eclipse that's being referred to here will generate the purest form of unalloyed gold via draining the sun's color. If this plan did work, Miquella would be able to generate a stronger form of this needle and treat Godwyn and Malenia's curse permanently. However, as we all know, Radagon was sealing the movements of the stars, which means the eclipse...
I don't think that would have worked, and I think the biggest issue is that Godwyn doesn't have a soul, so they may have wanted to drain what was left within Godwyn with like the whole imagery of like the moon draining the sun of its color within the eclipse, and that would potentially allow like the gold to come out of Godwyn, so that way his will isn't stuck within the corpse either. And I know without like a lot of context, what I just said there might sound a bit out there, but I do think there's a lot of support for it when we look at things related to like the D brothers, like how I'd mentioned earlier. It's not that it says that they're of two bodies and two minds and one soul. It's that they're of two bodies, two wills, and one soul, and a bunch of stuff like that. If you guys are unfamiliar with my work and want to know more about that, I do have a video where I talk about gold and silver specifically, and that kind of deals with pretty much all of the stuff that's coming up right now. Yeah, so he's definitely talking about Erdtree burial in terms of proper death, but that's kind of like an arguable thing because like the Erdtree wasn't always around. So was there proper death before the Erdtree? Like, yeah, it's its own thing. Billy's afraid that Miquella is going to be seriously evil. Understandable. He's the most fearsome Empyrean after all. Yeah, Imma says Miquella wants to return his brother's soul to his body so they can die properly and fix the mess it made. I don't know if he thinks that he could bring the soul back, but like I said, if he could at least give him peace or like his will peace, then everything would be good. He just needs him to have like to chill out and stop the death route. Afraid Miquella will go full Griffith on us in the DLC? No, man, I think that'd be awesome to see. Maybe not, I don't know, like it'd be cool even if it's expected. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but I know like a lot of people have mixed feelings. I just want the DLC to slap and to actually be worthwhile content that could potentially transform like the base game content into being more relevant as well. So they'll just kind of never have the luxury of being able to fully meet people's expectations after the cat's been out of the bag.
Oh, Radagon was sealing the movements of the stars, which means the eclipse Miquella was counting on as a potential strategy to generate unalloyed gold was prevented, which explains why Miquella ordered Malenia to defeat Radagon in the trailers.
So I don't necessarily think this works exactly. I mean, it might, but so... never mind. I'll just leave that alone.
Explains why Miquella ordered Malenia to defeat Radagon in the trailers, while sparing Godric's life prior, even though both Godric and Radagon has valuable shards of the Elden Ring. Malenia wasn't just interested in the shards, but Radagon...
Yeah, Malenia is really weird because she like lets Godric go. Apparently Radagon also beats the crap out of Godric but lets him go, but neither really try to claim his shard. I just don't understand the whole like motivations between like the Shattering and these demigods. Maybe they were like, all right, we'll settle our fight first and then go get Godric and all the other ones to become Elden Lord. Like, Melina doesn't seem like the type of person to me that would have wanted to become Elden Lord. So maybe she was just kind of acting on the behest of her little brother Miquella. And yeah, who really knows? I mean, I could totally see Radagon wanting to be Elden Lord because he's got like that whole Godfrey complex going on and wanting to be the Lord of the Battlefield's lion. So he makes sense. She does not, at least for me. So then Elazer said, you believe it was my influence that made you want to start looking at the mistranslations potentially in Devil May Cry? And you're not a pro, but you're learning. So that's awesome. I'm really curious about that because like Devil May Cry is something that I've like never really played. So I'd definitely be interested to learn if there were significant differences in any of the localizations there. Billy says, of all the various enemy types we see in the Erdtree, ones that we don't see at all are those who live in death. And then Scowlies asks about revenants. Technically, revenants are not those who live in death. They do not take extra damage from things like Litany of Proper Death. And they, unlike the normal those who live in death, take obscene amounts of damage from healing incantations, which leads me to believe that they're actually curses and not those who live in death. And what exactly the difference is supposed to be between a curse and those who live in death is kind of up for debate. But at the very least, those who live in death became those who live in death because they came into contact with Deathroot specifically.
In specific, she needed to defeat Radagon so that stars could resume their movements and Miquella can enact his plans for the eclipse, not just for the revival of Godwyn but also Malenia's sickness of decay. Yet, as we all know, this was the perfect opportunity for Moog to get in and snatch Miquella from his cocoon.
Alright, so sorry to like keep pausing it so often. I'm going to like back up a bit so that way he could go through his point again. But Buster Suds brought up a very interesting question that I've like wondered myself, and I like couldn't help myself but address it now. And he asks, he's way behind on the stream, but could Radagon Radagon be the Elden Beast controlling Marika, since we don't get a remembrance from him and just the Beast? That has been a theory that I've had, especially because like there's this whole thing relating to the two fingers, and they want the Golden Order itself to continue. And the Elden Beast, when it does use the Sacred Relic swords or Sacred Relic blade, and it's like Ash of War, or it's like weapon skill, its art, whatever you call it, it uses waves of gold, and that technique also uses like Radagon's Elden Ring rune, and it uses like golden order symbols. And so it's curious to me whether or not the Elden Beast was like the shadow within Marika that was Radagon. And since it says God slain, and the text on the sword mentions that like it was a god that should have lived a life eternal, but Radagon was the one that got transformed into the blade, it makes it seem as though it's talking about Radagon. But we don't necessarily defeat Radagon when we defeat the Elden Beast. We defeat the Elden Beast, which says God slain. So is Radagon the Elden Beast, which is the god that should have lived a life eternal? I think it's plausible, to be honest. I mean, I know it's going to be a very messy theory that a lot of people might dislike, but I mean, it's plausible, I think. So it's a good question. Imar asks, you want to ask this because you weren't around, but is being this lost in the lore like how it was in the Dark Souls days? So yes and no. Like, I feel like in many ways, depending on the game, and I wasn't always like around for like the beginning of the Dark Souls days. I kind of like stepped into the scene a couple years after Bloodborne got released, so I'm not super familiar with how it was like in the early days. But I was familiar enough with like some of the community to get like a good vibe check of like what theories were going around when. In the short-term answers, yes, people are going to be lost, especially when the games first get released. But I feel like once the games are done with their life cycle of releasing content for them, the dust settles, and then people like start actually really getting things organized and clearer. And Elden Ring is very different from the other games because so much is left open-ended and we have so many actual characters to work with. But unlike the other games where we kind of know their motivations and like what they're all about and what they're for, we meet these characters in Elden Ring but still have no idea like what their motivations are. So it's a very different beast. So in general, the experience is similar in that there's a lot of ambiguity, but I feel like Elden Ring is ambiguous in a different way than the other games, and it actually provides us a lot of details that the other games lacked. So it's kind of like the opposite issue for some of the other games, I feel. So hopefully that makes sense for you. And yeah, Buster says it could be a motivation for breaking the ring that she was losing her ability to stay autonomous. And yeah, that is a strong possibility. But I think nonetheless, the catalyst of Godwyn losing his life and Deathroot potentially trying to infiltrate the Erdtree may have been the real kick in the ass Marika needed to go through with it. Or, I mean, I don't think like shattering the ring was her first choice, but I feel like once Godwyn died, she felt as though she didn't have another choice. All right, I'm going to go back to the video, and thanks you guys for all of the comments so far. I appreciate that.
And Miquella can enact his plans for the eclipse, not just for the revival of Godwyn, but also Malenia's sickness of decay. Yet, as we all know, this was the perfect opportunity for Mohg to get in and snatch Miquella from his cocoon, just when Malenia was on a march to defeat Radagon, leaving Miquella in a vulnerable state. Which is why Malenia was left in shambles and despair when we found her in the Erdtree. Not just because the madness-inducing properties of the Ionian explosion, but also Miquella's unexpected kidnapping. See, what I'm trying to say is that Elden Ring is an extremely rich game that requires you to connect the information in holistic ways to understand what's really happening. Regurgitating text from the game over and over again will not result in accurate or deep understanding of Miyazaki's magnum opus, which is why understanding Egyptian mythology is helping us figure out the themes and motivations of characters for this DLC.
So, in a sense, I understand what he's saying. I'm obviously like a more of a literalist as it comes to the text, so I'm going to have a lot of reservations and disagreements about this. And part of my disagreements come from the fact that for this kind of comparison or example, you can substitute Egyptian mythology with whatever belief system anybody else wants to interpret Elden Ring with. So you could work with Norse mythology, as we watched like videos this week about the potential Norse mythological connections to Elden Ring. Within Ontos's own videos, we've got like Jungian connections, chemical connections, Egyptian connections. Are all of these connections relevant? Maybe, but are they that all-encompassing that Elden Ring kind of gets like diminished and you can purely know these outside sources? I don't think so. I think that these can be handy references to get a better understanding of like literature in general and compare like a lot of the overall design elements and themes between the games and look at the parallels and like gain appreciation for what is similar and what's different between them. So with that being said, I do disagree that like looking at the text will not allow you to get the clear answers. I think for the most part it can, and when you do have the cases where like the text fails to give you the full picture, I think rather than looking all the way out here for the outside sources inspiration, it'll probably serve you better to first look at the other FromSoft games to see if there's any analogs there with which you can compare the games, and then from like that point on, I would say, yeah, like look at other media and not just like mythology, because Berserk is one of the most commonly referenced games. But if you look at some of the interviews that Miyazaki's done, or even like some of the enemy designs throughout the FromSoft games, you can see that he's taken inspiration from anime such as like what's it called, Record of Lodoss War, Berserk. He's taken inspiration from like the not Final Fantasy, but the fighting fantasy genre of like games and books, whatever you want to call them, as well as like Magic the Gathering. So I would say like be careful with like such sweeping statements, because this kind of inadvertently makes it sound as though you're presenting yourself as an authority, when I don't think you quite have that level of authority that you're trying to assert here.
Now let's talk about the identity of the potential boss fights we'll encounter in the Field of Reeds. There are a total of 7 walking mausoleums in Elden Ring that houses the unwanted soulless demigods of Queen Marika. Land of Reeds is the land of those who live in death, a realm for those who were unable to have a proper death, just like Godwyn and the 7 soulless children of Marika living corporeally without a soul. We will kill and defeat these soulless children, including Godwyn, to give them a proper death, a true death, so that they can be revived via the Erdtree. In Miquella's case, they will be revived with the Erdtree rather than the Erdtree when the time comes. Luthil sacrificed her life so that in death she could continue to protect a soulless demigod until their revival. And with this final piece of the puzzle understood, let's trace the steps back to the foundation of this realm. Phoenix in ancient Egypt and classical antiquity is a fabulous bird associated with the worship of the sun. The Egyptian phoenix was said to be as large as an eagle with brilliant scarlet and gold plumage. It represented the revival of the sun god, reborn from its ashes, the revival of Godwyn the Golden, the scion of the Golden Bough. Castle's soul, Miquella's plans to create unalloyed gold using the eclipse. It all provides the backbone for this following argument. The outer god specifically not mentioned in Placidusax's remembrance, the envoy beast Twinbird's outer god, alluded to in the Twin Kite Shield description. I predict that similar to how we fought Elden Beast, the envoy of greater will in the Erdtree, in the base game as the final boss, we will do a similar thing in this DLC. In the shadow of the Erdtree, in the field of reeds, the outer god Nigredo's Twinbird will reside in this Deathroot corrupted Erdtree. My only hope is to have a proper Twinbird final boss fight, unlike this abomination of a boss fight with Elden Beast. We will see if this extremely long development time will give Miyazaki enough time to design an impressive and enjoyable final boss fight, unlike Elden Beast, to cap off his magnum opus.
Alright, so Ontos had asked us to go back to 7:10 and read the text on screen, so let's go there. Alright, so he said Millennia did previously kill Godric to get the shards of the Elden Ring. This is a hint that Millennia's only reason to fight Radahn wasn't just to get his shard. Miquella needed the movement of the stars to continue for Miquella's plan of eclipse to initiate, even at the expense of risking Ranni's ascension to the Empyrean lineage. Otherwise, Godwyn and Millennia couldn't permanently be cured, as the strongest form of unalloyed gold central to Miquella's goals can't be procured otherwise without the eclipse. So I thought about mentioning this earlier, but I held off because it didn't seem relevant at that point in the video. But depending on how you read the conspectuses of Raya Lucaria, it seems as though the moon holds sway over the stars, but it doesn't necessarily seem as though the stars hold the same sway over the moon. And you might be able to make a case against that because of Radahn's actions. But to be fair, we are told that fate is held within the stars of the night sky, and so if he could just hold the stars in general, he can hold back their fate. But it does raise the question whether or not Ranni could potentially overcome this with the moon. There's also the potential that Ranni and Radahn and Rykard could have been working together. She might have needed the fate in the stars to be held up to allow her to overcome the destined death that should have killed her soul that ended up killing Godwyn instead. We've got a lot of unknown variables about their relationship and the stars' relationship to the Carian children and the fate in the night skies. That is definitely worth considering. And then Billy asked, what's my opinion of the spirit statement that Godwyn was Marika's unwanted child? So I would say that particular reading that you have, that the spirit is referring to Godwyn, I think is a misreading. And the spirit outside of the, which one is it? It's the Third Church of Marika in not Castlemorn, but in the Weeping Peninsula. Or no, that's the Church of Pilgrimage one. Yeah, the Church of Pilgrimage Ghost isn't saying that Godwyn is her unwanted bastard child. She's saying it's saying the soulless demigod within that mausoleum is an unwanted child of Queen Marika. And that's kind of made a little bit more explicit in the 1.0 version of the game. Let me pull it up for you. All right. The mausoleum prowls, cradling failed champions within. O Marika, Queen Eternal, it cradles a misshapen bastard of yours. So, yeah. I don't exactly remember the Japanese off the top of my head. I mean, I could look it up, but I don't think it's going to meaningfully change it. So I'll just leave that alone for now. And Skyleezy asks, didn't she fight Radahn because she was looking for Miquella and she thought Radahn had him? We don't really know why that confrontation came to be the way that it was. Imar says, it's an interesting concept of Godwyn and the other children of Marika who dies soulless being the boss in the DLC. Yeah, and that's a pretty interesting idea, because if they're soulless, does that mean their souls were destroyed, or were they taken elsewhere? It's a good question. So we was at 1050, so I'll back up to 1030. This is good.
We will see if this extremely long development time will give Miyazaki enough time to design an impressive and enjoyable final boss fight unlike Elden Beast, to cap off his magnum opus, to cap off truly one of the greatest video games ever made. Hey guys, I've spent a lot of time contemplating and researching before making this video, so if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel and give the video a like if you've gotten value from it. Write your thoughts in the comments below, and finally watch these lore videos playlist in preparation for the DLC. You don't want to be lost when Miyazaki pulls some crazy plot twists. You don't want to be lost when the shadow of the Erdtree rolls around. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
All right, so, oops. I think this video kind of has the same issue as the last one of trying to say that like the god of the Twinbirds was the god of Placidusax and potentially had control over the Elden Ring, which I think it's an interesting idea, but in order for that to work for me, you need to explain how this god came into possession of the ring and like essentially took it away from the greater will, and how the greater will kind of gained it back later. So what I mean by that is if the greater will sent the Elden Ring and the Elden Beast into the lands between, you could potentially make the argument that it should still have some modicum of control over the both of them when it lands in the lands between. But if that's the case, how does that get co-opted by the outer god of the Twinbirds? That's kind of not set up for me. And then if the Twinbirds did have control of it, when did they lose control of it? And then like how did that happen? And then is that why Marika has it? Is it because of like all like, Godfrey? And then what was the Elden Beast doing when like when you had like a Twinbird incarnation of the Elden Ring? Was it like a different form of it? Was the Twinbird itself like the Stormlord, which is kind of like the equivalent of the Elden Beast of that time? Because that's an idea that's actually like really fascinating to me, and I could see there being a bit of merit to it, especially in relation to like Godfrey having defeated the Stormlord, and then that could potentially like tie into the Age of the Erdtree, but you know, there's just not enough to really work with there. Imar asks, would the Honorable Radon be one to kidnap Miquella? You don't think so? You believe Millennia fought Radon for another reason. You don't know if it was for his shard, or you presume to resume the movement of the stars and fate. And that's like one of my biggest gripes about the lore of Elden Ring, is that we know what happened, sort of, but we don't know why it happened, like completely. So yeah. All right. So those are all of Ontos's videos that he like asked me to go through. So I'm going to go ahead and link it into chat. If you want to give him a like and a sub, feel free. Chadwick thinks the Millennia versus Radon thing could be like to settle the title of strongest essentially and become the Fist of the North Star. All right, so that'll pretty much be it for tonight's stream. Ontos, thank you for being a good sport about letting me react to your videos, even though I have like such strong disagreements. Hopefully when you get the time you can like go back through it and see where my disagreements were, and if you have more questions, feel free to like ask me on the Discord or whatnot. I am more than happy to oblige when I can. And yeah, hopefully on my next video, I'll be going into a lot of these subjects in depth to give a kind of unfiltered answer or unfiltered viewpoint as to like where my perspective is coming from, and that will hopefully resolve a lot of questions. But this is going to be a really big project so far. I think I've already got like 9 or 10 single spaced pages worth of a script written, and I don't know how much longer I even have left. So yeah, it's going to be a long one to produce. All right. But yeah, that'll be it for tonight's stream. Thank you all so much for joining me. as usual. We will be going live again tomorrow or tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So hopefully we'll catch you on the next one for some more lore, video game news, and things of similar themes. So, all right. Till the next time, I hope you guys take care and stay safe. Last Protagonist out.